Gonna call the meeting to order. It's the regular, actually, it's a special meeting for the Easton Housing Authority, Tuesday, March 19th, 5 PM. Roll call, Commissioner Tebow,
Here.
Commissioner Burrows.
Here.
Commissioner Paquin,
Here.
Commissioner Dennis Sheedy is here, and Commissioner Chrisanne Sheedy will be a little late. We're gonna start with agenda item number 2 tonight, the February warrant in the amount of $248,126.40.
I'll make a motion, we approve the warrant for February 2024 in the amount of $248,126.40.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion by Commissioner Burrows, a second by Commissioner Tebow. Any discussion?
GoDaddy.com, that's our website.
Yes, it's for the website and the users. All to use that as well.
Oh, okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, this is, not for the ship, it's a form question.
And that is unanimous. Agenda item number 3, the December 2023 quarterlies and financial statements, and the January 2024 financial statements. I would entertain a motion to accept and put on file.
So moved, yeah, second.
Motion by Commissioner Tebow, a second by Commissioner Burrows. Any discussion?
Well, Kathy, why are we getting both at the same time?
Because I came in a bit later because Dan was working on budgets at that time, and we had the budget meeting in the MBTA, so we held off on the December one until this month to use up on the previous meeting.
Okay, and everything looks fine, you're running right on.
And Dan touched on all this when he came into the meeting, for the budget meeting in March. Or February, I guess, it's in March.
Okay.
Any other discussion or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. Agenda item number 4, contract renewal for accountant services, Milne, Shaw and Robillard.
Again, this is the same contract we've had with this accounting firm for years, with the allowable increases that the department is allowing the accountants to make.
Was that the percentage of the increase?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's standard. Usually the Department of Housing, HLC, I will never get that right still.
That's good,
HLC. They tell the fee accountants basically what they're allowed to charge for all these programs. And we've had this particular firm, probably 15, 16 years now. There's only a few firms in the state that handle housing authority, financial statements, if you will, every month, just a few of them.
Do you need a motion to approve?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract for Milne, Shaw and Robillard PC.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Burrows, a second by Commissioner Paquin. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to make comments. I know that you, Mr. Sheedy, and I had a number of years ago when we were hiring our executive director that Mr. Robillard was very helpful in that. He advised us on a day-to-day stuff. He told us what we could afford and we could not afford. So I think he served us well. And I know this industry is sort of dying because DHCD is killing it.
Hmm.
There's only a handful, yeah, he said there's only a handful of key accounts that will even handle this. And we need a professional every month to
Absolutely.
put the books, obviously.
I would second Mr. Tebow's thoughts on, Dan's always been very agreeable to meeting with us. He puts it out in layman's terms for, you know, those of us that aren't, financial statements might not be a strong point, so that he spells it all out nicely for us, and, you know, I think he really does a good job. He understands his role, the delicate balance between the board and the director is to keeping that
And he works for the board.
working smoothly. He works for the board, but he understands the balance too,
Yeah.
that, you know, that's what I'm trying to say is, that it's nice, it's a very professional relationship, and it's
Definitely.
my thoughts anyway on that. So. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? That is unanimous. We're gonna run out of things to talk about if she doesn't hurry up.
You're gonna have to start with me sometime. I can talk slowly.
Agenda item number 5, January 9th, 2024, approval of minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Tebow, a second by Commissioner Burrows. Any discussion on the January 9th minutes? Meeting minutes. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? That is unanimous. Agenda item number 6, fish number 088077, change order approval of $0. It's a time request only.
And that was due to COVID.
I'd say it's not due to COVID, that's not the changes on it. I think Mr. Paquin's in the business, his supply chain issues now.
Yeah.
Anything, COVID, I mean, they don't factory closed down for the COVID.
A lot of this, quite honestly, is the Delsey and their backlog.
That's the go-to. COVID, COVID,
Yeah.
COVID.
You know what, and I do understand that, they're not responding to the architects, they're not responding to the contractors.
They're not verbal, right.
Yeah, but, I do, it's just if it comes up in any board meeting I'm in and someone says COVID, I say, guys, come on.
Yeah.
I understand electrical parts are very, very difficult.
Yes. But we did get it.
Are we waiting on something? Is he looking for more time to finish a project?
No, this is all done.
Okay.
This is, just another process that the department wants us to do
Gotcha.
because the contract ran when it was supposed to.
Okay.
And this particular architect's very good. Truthfully, we have a very good working relationship with him.
So I'll make a motion to approve, was that already up there?
No, it wasn't.
No.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Tebow, a second by Commissioner Burrows. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That is unanimous. Agenda item number 7 is the Executive Director's Report. I would entertain a motion to accept and put on file.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Burrows, a second by Commissioner Tebow. Any discussion concerning the Executive Director's monthly report?
Just on the sustainability award, so this is the one where we were going to get the windows at no cost, but they were replacement windows, so they're not reconstruction.
Under $500,000 worth of inflation.
So that the HLC is now through, they've added another $500,000 support to buy the windows, and then they'll all be new construction.
Correct,
And the concern on the replacement were that there was
the airtight seal,
the airtight seal.
So are they doing siding with the new construction windows?
yes.
That kinda goes hand in
Siding
hand.
and the windows simultaneously.
Yeah. Because the replacement windows make sense, you know, if you're not doing siding, but if you're doing siding, it makes all the sense in the world to do new construction windows.
But we had an award, that we found through, ARPA funding, if you will, through the utilities,
Mhm.
that would have covered the cost of the replacement windows, so we could have done all 10 buildings at the same time. Long story short, we went back and forth with HLC several times, they didn't want us to do it, we signed the notice to proceed to do this, and suddenly they found funding to cover the cost of the windows
Nice.
through the sustainability, so everything, we will be able to do all 10 buildings, siding and windows, once they put it out to bid.
Yeah, by the way, in my home, I have new construction windows that were put in afterwards because I had some rot. Then I had some replacements and new construction was so much better.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a significant
Yeah.
difference, so.
It'll be worth it.
Oh, yeah, definitely, it looks so much nicer, the units, and, both 104 and, unit 32, unit 137 have both been, 104 will be leased tomorrow, and 137 is already leased. So we currently don't have any vacants, but we have a few more on the horizon that we're aware of. Getting a handle on it though,
Yeah, it's
significant.
significantly, yeah, it's. Any other discussion or concerns regarding the executive director's monthly report?
Good time.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That is unanimous. All right.
You want me to just slide down here? That'll be easier? How do you want to?
No, you can sit next to him.
Let the record show that Commissioner Chris Ann Sheedy has arrived at 5:15 p.m.
Oh, lucky you.
All right, now, agenda item number 1, Attorney Michelle Randazzo is to present the updated draft of the Easton Housing Authority personnel policy.
Good evening, everyone. Michelle Randazzo again from KP Law. I don't want to sit to anybody's back, so I'm going to kind of sit over here, but I might need to push up a little bit next to Kathy. Some of you may be aware that I worked with Mass Naro to develop a template personnel policies a few years ago. And the template policies are really just that, right? They're a starting point for housing authorities to sort of customize what fits for them, but also to include policies that you should have based on changes in the law. Many housing authorities adopted personnel policies, I don't even know when, but back when we had mimeographs, right? Like not even photocopiers. And so they all tended to look the same and have some similar provisions. But what I did with Mass Now was try to sort of bring them up to date. And also try to sort of where authorities have unions and union contracts, and work with different authorities to try to make adjustments to the template policies that fit your size organization, your employee pool, and also reflect any changes in the law that have occurred since the last time personnel policies have been adopted or updated. And so you folks had me come in to work with Kathy, and we took the existing personnel policies and tried to incorporate those into the template. And what's before you today is sort of the working draft that we have, together with any policy decisions that the board needs to make. Because generally speaking, things like benefits, vacation, holidays, those are a matter of discretion to a large degree, for the Board of Commissioners. And we've noted throughout this draft what are policy decisions for the board. I'm happy to walk through it with you, answer questions if that's more efficient. There are some ways where Kathy and I had discussions about, well, this is what the policy that exists said, but this is what we do in practice, and we try to align those so that there is something that's a little more up to date and current with practice. You'll see there are a couple of places where I made notations that I wanted to point out. We made this change because, but ultimately it's still for the board to review and decide upon. So I defer to you folks as what you think would be the most efficient way to review. We can go page by page and stop and see if anybody has questions, or you can start with questions if you'd like. It really is up to you folks. I'm here for your convenience.
Board have a preference?
It's an awful long,
Yeah.
I know, right? So page by page might be a little much.
but I do think that, once you get past like page 19, there's just stuff that has to be there, statements about policy, laws that we have to abide by. I only have 5 or 6 comments, I don't know, so I can go through page by page at the beginning and see it. And quite a couple of questions too. You want to on that?
I have 2 pages.
Well,
But I mean, this is,
You need to
this,
break your pencil.
but I mean, this is a big document compared to what you had, right? And, to some degree, look, I traffic in words, right? That's my job. So I am trying to be mindful that when we put these together, we're not necessarily just saying words for the point of saying words. And I should talk a little bit about my philosophy on personnel policies, because I think that will help you in sort of knowing where I was coming from in this document. When I work with folks, and my work is almost exclusively in the public sector. And, there's 2 schools of thought on personnel policies. One is don't put anything in writing that you're not legally required to. I don't ascribe to that. I ascribe to a second school of thought, which is this is, a guidance document, not just for your employees, but for your supervisors, for the people that come down the road in later years, so that everybody is sort of working from a same set of understandings and principles, right? And of course that requires that they be updated periodically. But if you are anticipating any transition, I mean, it's good to have something that gives folks guidance, a one-stop shop, if you will, for a compilation of the policies. And so we break these policies up, and it's totally a matter of this is not legally mandated, but I like to break them up into categories, right? Here's who we are, the basic structure of your organization. Here's our general guiding principles. Here's your benefits and your leave and all of that stuff. And then here's our general personnel policies. And as Commissioner Tebow said, it's some of the things that are required by law. Other things are ones that we've developed over time as being good, samples, which, again, we're lawyers, right? So we cover all the bases, maybe 2 or 3 times around, right? And so there's certainly discretion on the part of the board members if they want to streamline certain things, or if you do, I'll tell you whether you can or you can't, right, from a legal perspective. But I tried to make notes throughout of sort of what are the required policies and that sort of thing. So that's the philosophical approach I have to personnel policies, which is it is an educational tool not only for your current employees, but for those folks that come down in the future, for your commissioners in the future, right, to understand what the rules are, so to speak, whether they're rules or policies, benefits, like have it all laid out in one place so that you're not also saying, hey, didn't we adopt a policy like at a board meeting 3 or 4 years ago? And we did look at some of those policies that you had adopted and tried to incorporate them into the updated policies, policy manual. You can call it personnel policies, employee handbook, whatever you want to call it. But that's, as I described sort of how I structured it and organized it, there's no magic to that. That's just a way that made sense to me, right? I also did try to, when we were developing the model policy with Mass Narrow, to look at what many authorities had traditionally had in place for years, and sort of incorporate some of those themes, so, in terms of anti-nepotism and codes of conduct and things like that, so that it didn't look completely foreign to what folks had in existence. So that's just a little explanatory. note as to how my approach and my philosophy about personnel policies.
You do mention early on, that these can be amended.
Absolutely.
That was my question.
So this
Absolutely.
this isn't something poured in concrete. This is something can be amended as we go along too in the future.
And I do find that even in my authorities where we've gone through this process and done a complete overhaul, that, you know, in a particular situation, how they operate, they may find, you know what, the way that you had it written, it didn't work for us, we're gonna change that, right? That's completely up to you folks. Sometimes it's a matter of, you know, what's written on paper looks like it fits, but when you go to apply it in a particular situation, you may find that that's not really consistent with how we process things, and we want to make some adjustments.
Okay, questions for,
Well, he asked my question.
So just if we go through your comments on page one, it says that the board will hire, fire, promote, transfer, or will be involved in that, and that's not the way it's been working, which is fine with me. To be quite honest with you, I didn't know it said that there. I think that we hire an executive director, and if she does a good job hiring people, she does well. If she doesn't, that's her problem.
And I'll just add to that, my preference, quite frankly, and it's just sheerly from an open meeting law perspective, right? I'd much rather have that hiring firing authority vested with the executive director, because otherwise, if everything has to come to you folks, then that just creates additional processes in terms of the open meeting law. But as I said, we did pull it from the contract, and I wanted to flag it for you because it does, I think, require really an affirmative decision of the board as to which way you're gonna go on that.
There is just one other thing I wanted to say about it. It says the authority to appoint, promote. Later on, there's a question about whether the promotion should come to the board. And I'd like to discuss that when we come to it, because I do think there's a benefit to the executive director if it does come. And I think there's a benefit to the employee to be recognized in public, but that's just my comment on that.
And so I will just say that if you folks decide that you're going to have this, you know, be vested with the executive director, subject to that later language about demotion or promotion, we can reconcile those two. So, you know, say something like, you know, the authority to promote, appoint, promote, transfer, demote, is vested in the executive director, you know, subject to the provisions of whatever section on promotion.
Later
And
on,
then, yeah.
Any other comments on that? I'm looking at question. This is start here.
So I think it's a good time, since we're talking about this, to see what the sense of the board is otherwise. Are you all comfortable with that posture where we don't include, you know, sort of that hire firing subject to the board approval? If you folks want to talk about that further, we can just flag that. But since we've started the discussion, I think it's worth closing the loop on it.
I would agree that the hiring and firing should be at the discretion of the executive
That's
director.
typical.
And I also do endorse Mr. Tebow's thought that promotion should come before the board, just so for the recognition and so that the people, it's transparent to them too, that the residents see it and know that a process was gone through for this to happen.
Now, if the ED does hire and fire, do we get notified or of changes? I mean, not that we have to be asked, but do we kind of get notified on personnel changes?
Typically in the past, I've indicated
Just-
that in
yeah,
my,
We got a new maintenance guy, we got a new whatever
yeah, I
it
put
may be.
it in my executive director's report.
Okay.
And you've actually brought them to the meetings
Yes,
to introduce them.
yes.
And Attorney Randazzo has said it, so if it comes to us, and Kathy is making a recommendation based upon maybe 2 interviews, maybe a test, and we say no.
Right.
Based upon what?
Right.
I heard down the corner something. So it's a very awkward situation to do it. And again, in the end, Kathy's performance is based upon the performance of her staff that she should have the say in.
Agreed.
Any other discussion concerning this point?
No.
We all in agreement?
Yeah, we're,
Yes.
so with that, yeah.
Okay.
So I had nothing on page 2. Page 3, my question was, I thought we already had a affirmative action plan.
We have one in our admin plan for section 8,
Okay. But not one for, that's tied to
not
the
the
state?
one that I can find,
Okay.
yeah.
And Kathy, do we have that? Is that gonna be before the board?
Yeah, that's
There's
part of
board
the
vote.
whole,
That's not part of what they're marketing?
when it comes to the personnel policy,
There's pieces of that.
there's pieces of it, but there's not the affirmative action plan
And honestly,
for
it's-
employment.
I'm not sure that, there's a lot of clear guidance from EOLHC,
Yeah.
right?
We said it's their waiting list, they need to do the plan.
Well, but, you know, I have had one instance where well, it was DHCD at the time, there was a hire for an executive director, and they came back and they said, well, did you post it in all the places that you're supposed to in your affirmative action plan? And they made them do it over.
Yeah.
So, you know, I include this in the personnel policies just because it forces people to think about, do I have one? Where do I have it? And, you know, has it been updated? It's not legally required that you reference them in your personnel policies, but there's a state regulation that says you're supposed to have one. So it's, again, if I think about my philosophical approach to these as educational as well, I try to pull in all the different pieces that DHCD, EOLHC regulations say we're supposed to have in place, and try to put a placeholder in here so that it would, at a minimum, flag for you that there's a out there somewhere, and if anybody's watching, I can't say that to be sure, but like I said, I had that one instance where, and I think it was an executive director, but I can't remember for sure if it was a different position, but they were using, the housing authority was using a consultant, they had posted, they sent an offer, and after that, DHCD said, well, I don't think you posted in minority publications or things like that. I think it's a little outdated with Indeed and you know, ZipRecruiter and all of that. But as we know, sometimes, you know, the law lags behind the technology.
So that would bring me to page 4 where it talks about, it says specifically where we would advertise. I just say, my comment here was, things change so quickly, I'd leave it generic as possible. Because you can put down things that don't exist in a couple months. I don't know what the affirmative action plan says. I do remember listing 5, 6, 7 places we would advertise.
Yep. But that's all changed too, where, you know, the Brockton Enterprise that wasn't included as a minority newspaper. And it's like, well, who are they going, you know, what's their population that they're going after? It's changed dramatically.
Right.
That, you know.
The demographics usually fit the bill.
Right, and that's
Yeah.
why I think this is also an occasion to sort of revisit the affirmative action plan to make sure that it's updated and consistent with what, again, those demographics are, and to that point, that's why we don't have, look, I don't think, other than what DHCD might require, there's not a separate, like, general principle in mass general laws that you have to advertise any position, right? So we are sort of trying to be consistent with what we hear from DHCD or what they tell us or what's in their regulations in terms of process, right? Your old personnel policies had more detail in terms of process, and I just think it's, you know, it's outdated at this point. Whether it sets the amount of time that you advertise or whatever, I mean, you need to be able to have some flexibility, but again, this section refers to, again, either the affirmative action plan or the internal promotion policy, and I suspect that we'll talk more about that internal promotion policy when we get to it.
That's just my comment on the advertising, just leave it as generic as possible. Anything else on page 4? No, you haven't got there yet, Chris?
Jesus, Chris, you're gonna, I can't wait.
She starts on page 19,
Page 5, you have,
Yeah, oh, no.
the
I've gone through this.
pre-employment drug test.
Yep.
And medical screening, so we've always done that for maintenance, right?
Correct,
And we haven't done it for administrative.
correct.
So I think that's what everybody has done, because you're looking for people who can lift 50 pounds, who can work and whatever. In your office, you could be in a wheelchair and do the job, and, you know, many other disabilities. The only thing I have is, so we drug test marijuana. Marijuana legal.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna, that's one of mine.
Okay.
Finally, you get to my.
So we can, so
For the business.
So, again, I'll tell you where I came from, but this is ultimately a decision for you. So, everybody's got drug and alcohol policies, or you should have, right? And when marijuana was legalized, that did not change the fact that an employer can say, you can't use pot on the job, or you can't show up under the influence of pot. And so we felt very strongly to include that in your drug and alcohol use policies, okay? So that is in there, right?
And it should be. No, I'm not talking about use, showing up inebriated under whatever. I'm talking about, so you take a test.
Right.
I heard it stated.
30 days,
for
yeah.
30 days.
Well, and that's the question. You can hear different things, right? And so, yes, part of the problem, and I deal with a lot of law enforcement, right? Part of the problem we're having is like, so how do I know if someone's driving under the influence? There's no real, there's no breathalyzer for it or whatnot. So, it's up to you folks what to do with any of these tests, right? There isn't anything here that says, if you test positive for marijuana, we won't hire you,
Okay.
right? It's just, it's information that you folks get and you can make a decision, right? Sometimes it may require, someone might say, hey, look, I think that test is wrong, I wanna retest. There's my understanding, and I'm not a doctor or I don't do these medical screens, but I understand that oftentimes when folks go in for a screen, they do a split sample, or they ask them if they wanna do a split sample. So if one test comes back positive, they want the sample tested again. Like there's different things there to sort of sort through in a process.
Now, I'm just looking at practical purposes. I ride home every day. I think you do too, Dennis. I go by 2 marijuana dispensaries. They're very busy. So people are using marijuana, and most of the people are using it responsibly. People who were using it irresponsibly before, now they're using it irresponsibly now, same with alcohol. And so I just think as a board, we have to give Kathy some, it used to be black and white. It showed up, you
You're
were
done.
marijuana, you see you later. We're not talking.
Came up in a drug test that I was doing for an employee hire.
And then, and I get the call, what do we do? Well, what do you wanna do? I mean, I don't mean it flippantly, but it is a decision for you, you have to think about that, right? And often you'll have a dialogue with the candidate, and they'll say, oh, I had one guy that was like, well, man, I was at a party, 2 or 3 days ago, or 3 or 4 days ago, I didn't realize it would still be in my system. And, look, I'm not judging, right? I'm not.
Is there any language in there for random drug tests?
No, so random drug testing, because we are a governmental entity, is pretty strictly limited under constitutional principles. If you had any positions for which a CDL license was required, then that would be governed by federal Department of Transportation drug and alcohol testing requirements, which may, in limited circumstances, provide for random drug testing. But generally speaking, random drug testing is considered to be, unless you've negotiated with a union, for example, you don't really tend to do that in a non-union public sector entity unless you have CDL license holders that are governed under those federal laws.
The thing being with, you've got medical marijuana now and people that have prescribed usage. And if it shows up on their test, they could also have had a handle of whiskey the night before, and that's not coming up on their test. So it's like, you're not gonna know if they're alcoholics per se, but you're gonna know right off the bat that they might use marijuana.
And it's a judgment call then on your point, whether you continue, with the hire or not, and that's why I'm saying usually.
But it's like, it's a red flag for a person now that they've been found out,
Yeah.
technically.
Well,
So let's say, I'll give you a very obvious one. We use our judgment, it's a judgment. And the person comes through, it's marijuana and they are African-American and we say no, we were on the bubble anyways, no. Next person comes through, they're white, we thought everything else was fine, they tested well, we say yes.
yeah, anytime there's discretion, there's the opportunity for the challenge that that discretion has been improperly exercised or abused, right? But I don't, you know, in the situations that I've dealt with, we have had to look at, so what's the concentration? Like that actually makes a difference, right?
Yeah.
We've had the screeners say to employers, look, you wouldn't get that concentration from, you know, smoking a single joint 3 or 4 weeks ago. Like, we're not doctors, we don't know that, right? And I don't think that there's enough science out there for us to be able to, there's not a chart, right? So, you know, it's not written to include or exclude marijuana as part of the drug test that you do. And it's not written as to what you do with that. It is your choice whether you want to, and it doesn't have to be in connection with this, it can be at a later discussion, whether you want to provide any more specific guidelines. How to craft those would be interesting, right? Because I don't know how to do that, I don't know what to tell you, right? Is there some percentage you can pick out of the air that says if your drug and alcohol screen exceeds?
We do alcohol screening.
So I don't think you do pre-employment alcohol screening. Right. That's why just.
This is where Chris has been around for a long time as far as an executive director. I have had so many problems with alcohol.
Right.
I can't think of one problem I had with marijuana, but I've had many problems with alcohol. And so it's just, and we don't have to discuss it now, I just want to put out there, what about marijuana, and it's at our discretion. And I would hate to see this beautiful new employee, I think that he or she's gonna be the best in the world, and it shows up a little marijuana and we say,
And then you automatically go into panic mode. Oh my God, no, can't do that.
Well, and all I can tell you is the conversation that I usually have with folks is okay, so what do the test results tell you?
Yeah.
Can you get a little more information from the testing company about where this sits on the scale, right? And talk to the employee,
But
right?
then you gotta be consistent going forward.
Yes, yep.
Every other person is gonna be in that same range on the scale.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the decision not to test for marijuana. The only thing I'll say on that is that, you know, as the perception, as legal as it, I do a lot of marijuana work, I hate to say this, in one of many other hats I wear. As legalization has more time, the perception of marijuana changes, right? It becomes much more accepted generally. And the part that is, you know, can be particularly challenging is that there's much more product available and at higher doses and higher concentrations because it's legal, right? So there's, and I have this discussion with schools all the time, the vaping of the kids. You know, they just think it's, whether it's tobacco or marijuana, it's happening all the time. So I expect as years go on and your workforce, I don't mean to say becomes younger, but it's sort of like the kids that are now kids with marijuana is being legalized, they're gonna start into the workforce. You know, you may see you may see a demographic shift where marijuana may become more of an issue because it's accepted and used more widely as the time goes on after it's been legalized. So that's just something to, you know, I would say to think about is
How does that work where we use some federal funding and stuff like that?
Ask that too, thank you.
You know what I mean? Where it's, you know, illegal federally, but not statewide.
you know, we haven't, so there's, and I'm gonna forget dates, but there has, well, first off, you've probably seen some of the discussion at the federal level about trying to sort of change those rules. There have been at different times, and I think it depends on administration, but there have been some guidances from HUD that they're not gonna enforce. You know, in those states that have legalized marijuana, they're not gonna take sort of punitive action based on that. I mean, I think we still keep all of our units are all still smoke-free and they're marijuana smoke-free. But that's, you know, that comes on high, right? And they've had to acknowledge that the number of states that legalize marijuana has just grown. exponentially, and they've taken thus far, we're not gonna enforce, you know, as long as you're following the law of the state.
And past practice too, we only screened maintenance staff. Federal funds are not used on maintenance staff because they only work on state property.
Good point.
So it's our section 8 that has that. Now, that being said, where we're getting some of the SAPRA money now, even though that's not our maintenance guys, does that affect it? I don't know.
And can you continue to just test maintenance and not test administrative? Yeah, maintenance is driving the truck,
Yeah.
Right.
but,
And working with the equipment and
exactly. But is that eventually gonna be challenged, that why aren't you testing administrative as
So
well?
we did not put in here specifically maintenance, although you could, right? It's left open that just that, you know, candidates for positions that require this, right? I understand it's historically just been maintenance. I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think you're actually better to customize it to the types of positions where that's likely to be an issue, where having someone that operates under the influence where that can, you know, pose a public health safety risk. You know, so I don't see it as being, you know, apples to apples. I think it is apples to
I
oranges.
thought in the past it was always the personnel that had to operate our equipment, that we had to ensure under a separate policy for the vehicles. It was traditionally what was done in most authorities that I remember.
So there's no ED discretion on what she, you know what I mean?
Well, so I'd pick a category. Like if it's gonna be maintenance, it's gonna be maintenance.
Gotcha.
Right? Or if it's gonna be everybody, then it's everybody. Although I think there's more of a nexus between the physical plant personnel where they operate machinery, than necessarily, you know, an office assistant, for example. I always talk about the more medical information you have about somebody, the more you have to safeguard. So whether to do a sort of, we're just gonna send everybody for a physical and a drug test, I mean, you know, that's more medical information you have about someone that you need to safeguard, and more medical information from which someone who is not hired favorably may say it was because of that. So I don't necessarily think it's that there's reasons why you ought to just say it's gonna be blanket everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Every position. With your maintenance people, you got workers' comp issues, right? So that's, you know, I mean, that's sort of where a lot of this comes from, is that those folks are more likely to sustain a work-related injury for which you folks are gonna be, you know, through your insurer, but it's still gonna be an obligation.
Yeah, most
They
likely
do it.
maintenance, but administration can have.
Oh, they can have a slip and fall too, for sure. But the other thing to remember is that we're only talking about pre-employment screens.
Not somebody that fell out of the chair and, collected.
You are still able though, and this is something that I think can be challenging, but gets to the point that Commissioner Tebow raised, which is when you're dealing with your existing employees, right? You can have reasonable suspicion if someone is falling asleep at their desk, or is they're slurring their words, or stumbling while they're walking, or you smell the pot or you could still address that. That's not, and you know, again, this is the sort of the same problem we have with alcohol and the pre-employment screening is not gonna necessarily, you know, tell us whether we're gonna just have those problems moving forward, but at least.
That's why I was asking about the random drug test,
Yeah.
if somebody showed up, could you say,
That
Go to
would be
the
something
doctors.
addressed otherwise. I mean, I've actually, much like Tom, it was an alcohol situation in a previous.
Yeah.
And the employee showed up drunk several times, we addressed it, and that employee was released.
Yeah.
That was an employee that was screened prior,
Right.
came up clean.
Yeah, you never
Anything
know,
can happen, you know?
Yeah, I mean, as time goes by,
Yeah.
look like.
wait
I
a
feel like
day?
we're dealing with a lot of post-COVID, folks.
Craziness.
Yeah, okay, yep, and, you know, I can't say that necessarily is the trigger for certain things, but, you know, you don't know what happens in someone's
Yeah.
life, they could be the best, best employee, and something happens, and there's a turn for the worse, or vice versa.
The only other thing I had under here was that, are we to state that we're covering the expense of this exam and that they're going to our, physician for this drug test?
You can do that if you want, I mean, it says
I think we
will be
should.
sent for such examinations, we can absolutely put that in.
Yeah.
I know we have in the past.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
just
typically.
clearly say that it's our person and it's our cost.
Okay.
Because we say it somewhere else.
Yeah, we say it somewhere else.
Yeah, we do, but we didn't say it this, so I was like, we should say it.
Okay.
Did we hack that one to pieces enough?
Yes, we did. I think so. Wait until the first person shows up with marijuana. So, on the part-time, you have a comment down here, the existing policy says unless, so we board could approve benefits that not normally be given to part-time employees, we recommend that we don't do that. I agree 100% with that. I think that we're just, it's treating people differently.
Yeah, I don't even know where that even came from in the old policies. It
Yeah.
seems sort of inconsistent with how we normally handle these things.
Well, I've seen it.
Yeah, I know, but
So, Mrs. Smith is such a nice woman, and she's a widow, and she can only work part-time, and she needs all the benefits, so we're gonna give it to Mrs. Smith.
but just to your point, that's why we don't do that
Bias.
now,
I've seen it.
because you have that sort of disparity in treatment, and then people start saying, why is that happening?
Everybody wants to work part-time.
Exactly, full-time benefits.
I'll take that, I'll take that job if I can find
Or
it.
the authority for allowing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, I agree with that on 5. On page 6, you asked about probationary period, and that, or in the sole discretion of the executive director shall have the probationary period extended. I like that, Kathy, I've used it before, it's had very positive results about it.
I mean, we couldn't do it if we were in a union setting, because that would have to be negotiated with the unions.
Yeah.
But where you're not, why not give yourself that flexibility?
I say give it.
Mhm.
I agree to that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll give an example, we had one person start, they had some fairly significant health issues, we were concerned about that. Everything else was great, but we extended the period, he is now a fabulous employee who was promoted several times.
Yeah, I mean, just on that sort of, to punch off that example, I mean, somebody may be absent from work because of, a family member dies, or they have health issues, and you gotta just make sure that you have
Yeah.
adequate observation time of that person, when they're working at their best.
Should you give any term to
You,
that
you,
extension?
you can do that, that's up to you, that's a
Does that
policy decision.
make sense, or just leave it kind of open
I'd
ended?
leave it open, because what if you wanna just, you need them a month, I'd leave it up to the director, if you will. Maybe they only need a month or so, they gotta get.
I would cap it at another 6 months.
Oh, yeah, but I thought you meant but you can go right, total of a 12-month period. would be
Yeah,
reasonable.
I think that would be reasonable.
Yeah, because it's just, once again, treating everybody the same, consistency.
Well, the key comes in the situation I came, the manager was very nervous, said, I don't really know, so I'm not gonna recommend them for permanent employment.
Right, and
And I said, oh,
It's a
I'm
hard
getting all
decision.
positive,
Right.
of the work that the person was doing, so you happen to know him very well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I've had positive results with it.
okay, so I'll add in that an extension of a maximum of no more than an additional 6 months.
Yeah. Anything else on-
I have something under comp time.
I don't like it, that's what I.
Well, I don't like it either.
You don't actually-
I would
We've
get
never
rid
had
of
it, yeah.
Well,
I've seen it.
I
though.
have seen it used,
I've
I've
seen
seen it used appropriately, and it made sense, and it kind of worked in the case of whatever was going on, but I like to have it, if you're gonna use it, to give it a time frame that has to be used by, within
So
the
they-
month it's earned, or within the.
well, they changed the laws about comp time, so overtime and comp time comes from the Fair Labor Standards Act, right? And under the Fair Labor Standards Act, there's sort of some baselines, and you can provide better overtime, and only governmental employers can use comp time, private employers can't use it, right? So, the FLSA says that you can't unreasonably limit their use of it, right? And so
So you can't say you have to use it within a
Well,
certain time.
we can kind of craft the language in a way that, like, I wouldn't, say you have to use it within a month, right? And I have to look back exactly sort of what their outer limits are, in the FLSA, but we have had situations where there's been that kind of, language, and it's been problematic, because comp time is in lieu of paying them overtime, right? Now, you could include something that says, you're gonna get comp time, and if you don't use it within a month,
You lose it.
no, you gotta get paid for it,
Oh, okay.
right? You could do that, but there's not the same sort of use it or lose it parameters. If you wanted me to look at that further and sort of give you what the outer limits are, that we would be comfortable with, for in effect to use it or lose it, I'm happy to do that, if you even want comp time at all.
Tom already said he doesn't like it. Kathy said, but they don't have it. So.
I think you pay somebody for the time they work, I mean,
Yes,
they work, you know what I mean?
Exactly, you pay them, I've seen police departments get in big
Oh,
trouble with
it's-
comp time.
Yep.
They're paying huge overtime because they can't staff the thing, because everybody's on comp time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the tracking of comp time is an auditing of it. I've worked.
No, I mean, I'm not in favor of comp time, but, the reason why governmental entities can do it, or they have the legal authority to do it, is in recognition of some of the very issues about, like, oh my God, can we afford the overtime, and are we in a situation where we're forced into overtime because of, other circumstances, but
Yeah.
you don't have to allow comp time if you don't use comp time.
We're in good financial shape. It will never get us into trouble. It would usually be, and it's only for our non-exempt employees, right? It's something we can afford, and I agree with you, Martha, pay them, they're gonna work, pay them, here's the money, there's no time limit to it, put it in the bank, keep it forever. But the use of the comp time is where it really comes, because it's that time and a half, so I worked an hour, I get an hour and a half off.
If they're working over 40 hours a
Over
week.
40 hours. So I work 10 hours, I get 15 hours off, so it spirals down.
And then the person covering for them is getting time and a half, and it gets complicated.
Comp time has always been a very, very difficult thing to work.
I find that I have more situations where we're trying to zero out the comp time balances and move forward, right? So I have situations where, it's become unmanageable, or people are having balance because they didn't have the caps in effect or whatever, but you can always take the comp time out, and then if you decide at a later date that, you whatever the circumstances are that you're experiencing, you wanna have an ability to, not having comp time in this policy is not gonna preclude the ability to Kathy wouldn't have to wait for a policy amendment to, she would not be legally precluded under the FLSA from comp time, but the point of having language in here is just to set forth those really strict limitations. You can't approve it without being approved in advance, this is the cap, but if you're not using comp time, and that's your overall policy, you don't have to put it in there.
I can tell you my comfort level in your position, when someone asks, I say, we don't do that.
We don't do it here. There's no need, truthfully, for admin. Maintenance obviously gets paid overtime when they work over their 40 hours. There typically is no reason for comp time. Or a small office.
So just take it out.
Yeah, folks are comfortable with that, again, it's not legally required, but like I'm a little over expansive sort of, so I give you all the options, and then you can kind of figure out what fits your organization best.
And as we said, we can always add it back in at a later
Yeah.
date.
Yeah.
I don't see it happening, but
Mm-hmm.
I say remove it.
Most comp time, and I don't know anything about this in public meeting, is when the executive director says, yeah, you can work through lunch and you can leave early to go to your medical appointment, we're gonna do this, and there's some flexibility given that. So it's all used within
I've
the
done
same
that.
day.
Yeah, don't go to lunch, just leave, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or come in early or whatever it may
Exactly.
be. Yeah.
My staff used to take the minutes of the meeting, and I would say, you can have the next afternoon off.
Right,
The next
exactly.
day, you have that afternoon
Yeah,
off.
but I don't consider that even comp time, that's time within your week, and you're paid a
It's just
salary,
customer
so
service,
it's
yeah.
balancing out.
But it takes care of it, is all.
Yeah.
So I think what I'll do here is actually put it is the policy that has an authority to not allow use or
Provide.
approval or commentary. So that's clear, right?
I had just one question, on the hours of operation, is there any change there? It says 35 hours into an hour, is there any change from what we're doing? Okay. And I see we're increasing the beeper pay from 75 to 100.
I would like to, it's been 75 for a few years now. These guys get very few calls as it is because they do a good job.
Yeah. From what I've seen, that there's been a lot of surveys going around, you probably saw them, 100 is, 100, yeah, been a lot. 100's on the low side, so I would
Yeah.
say that, no problem.
So what is that for? I'm sorry. You said it'd be,
On-call pay.
okay,
The
yeah,
guy
yeah.
on call just has to be on call for that weekend.
So he gets $100 to be on
Just
call.
automatically, yes.
It's
Even
for-
if
it's
they
for
don't
carrying
have
And now when he,
Beeper,
now when he gets a call, is it a 4-hour minimum thing, or how does that work? 2-hour minimum? Sorry, I'm learning the ropes.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's, I mean, it's,
That's reasonable.
sometimes it's.
I mean, you could take up a guy's whole weekend, right? I mean, he's gotta be,
Exactly.
he can't have the cold beer and be on call, you know what I
And
mean?
they don't, we got a great crew.
Yeah,
We really do.
that's what I mean, it's a big ask.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they never complain, and it's a good group of guys.
As long as they're really clear about it when they're hired.
I think that's reasonable.
I just had on the on-call coverage, is there anything we need to add or wanna talk about that says, you know, if you wanna switch it, if you're taking a week vacation that you're supposed to be on call, how does all that get ironed out and covered and?
Yeah, that's,
Because
that's
we had many issues that we used to do around that, many issues.
Typically, they usually work it out in-house from everybody I know.
Yeah,
You know, hey, I got this week's vacation, can you do 2 weeks of call back to back?
Yeah, the group we currently have,
They're
they
good.
iron it out.
Right, but if you don't have that group, what do you do
And
then?
then I've seen it all go south.
But my
Real
theory
bad.
on that, and in past practices, what has happened is, if they couldn't figure it out, they would have to come to me, and seniority would overrule that if that person couldn't cover that on call. I mean, our guys plan out their on call January 1. They go through the calendar, they all know, and they have never had a problem yet. Granted, that can always change, but ultimately, that would be the decision of the maintenance supervisor and myself to figure out how to handle
It
it.
requires it in their job description that they do it, correct?
Overtime, correct,
The
You have
on-call.
to take on.
on call, yes.
And so now they're being asked to do what they're required to do. If they don't do it, you could discipline them.
And this does say that, like, again, you had a separate on-call policy that we largely incorporated here with a few tweaks. And there is a requirement that if the on-call person can't cover on an emergency basis, he's gotta find someone else to cover, and I
I
think
did
if he
see
doesn't.
that, but it was more or less that, you know, I wanna take this week of vacation, it was unplanned or whatever, and now I gotta switch this. And, you know, I asked so-and-so, and they won't do it, and they never do it for me, you know?
Yeah, I kind of feel like with the vacation front, like, and I think maybe when we look at the vacation provision, we'll see whether or not we wanna tweak that at all, but usually you're gonna be out for a week, you gotta plan it, and you gotta get,
Mhm.
and it's, you know, you ought not to be planning vacation on a week that you have the beeper, or that these issues have to be.
So maybe the week is a bad thing, it was like a weekend, you know, got a wedding invitation we didn't expect, and now it doesn't fall in sync.
It says they're supposed to, it's their,
Yeah,
it says
I
here, it's
know.
their responsibility, and they can be disciplined if they don't do that.
They will be disciplined.
Yeah. And luckily, we haven't had that problem.
But if it does, again,
Correct.
you write it so it does, and we do have a couple remedies. One is they're not doing what they're being asked to do, and second, right here, it says, and I thought, you know, you don't get your $100 and then it goes in your personnel file. Your second one, you don't get your $100 and you're going to be suspended. And third one, you're terminated. I mean, it's fairly severe.
And again, if you find that in practice, you know, because some of what we deleted from the previously approved on-call policy was just not happening in practice. But if you're finding that you need something more specific, whether it's because you've got a change in crew, change in personnel, or, you know, just a different track, is method of tracking, you can always add some more.
Like you said earlier, though, sometimes less is more. You know what I mean?
Well, that's just because as a lawyer, like I, it's 25 cents a word, right? No, I'm kidding, but like, I just wanna, if it's not reflective of what your practice is, there's no point in including it. That's sort of how I feel, right? And that's why we took out some language, because it wasn't happening in practice. And so then you have, a procedure that's not reflective of how you operate.
And the offense was the current on-call policy of the authority.
Yeah, okay. Then she added it in egregious circumstances.
Yep.
And the one that is other misconduct and personal deficiencies that issues above that can be bypassed in favor of more severe discipline, serious discipline. After you terminate them, what do you do?
A really bad reference.
Yeah.
I think that sort of gets to sort of this like, well, I'm going away for a week and bye, see ya. Right, like I would say that that's really serious,
Yeah, or
Or
that's,
each day counts as a new.
or the person's always,
If they have the right camaraderie, a lot of times somebody will cover for them. You know what I mean? That happens all the time.
All right, what page you got next there, Chris?
I just keep on rolling.
So, on the performance evaluations, there's no legal requirement that you ever do any. If you choose to do performance evaluations, if you think it's a good idea, then you should do them. In talking with Kathy, we thought at least every other year.
We did review that.
Yeah, at the
Oh,
last meeting,
okay,
yeah, I
great,
think I
okay.
called you.
There's no bonuses or anything like that, right? So, yeah, that would be the only.
And does an evaluation have to be reviewed and done in person and discussed, or is it just, here's your evaluation, you can walk off with it
Well,
and read it?
that's a management issue,
Okay.
right? Like, I do feel like it's, and I'm, I can tell you what the law says, but I can't say that I'm the best manager in the world. If the people that work for me don't do a good job, I usually run and do it all myself, right? So I don't know that I'm a great manager of people, but I think it really is gonna be sort of what is a good manager. I would think you would wanna sit down and talk with an employee and go
I do.
through,
Yeah,
through an evaluation as opposed to just
when I
being.
have done them, that is what that's what I've done.
But it doesn't have to be in writing, okay.
I mean, I will say there should be some documentation that goes into the personnel file, because if it is, for those of you that are going to the conference next week, when I do my presentation on discipline, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen, so.
All right.
Yeah, and
Uh,
employee files are pretty, good, that's a good one.
the holidays, did we add any holidays to the list?
Well, I think you already added Juneteenth, right?
Yeah,
I
the
don't-
only one that was in question was that Good Friday one.
Yeah, so,
The wording on the first one, half day before New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve is December 31st, so you're saying a half day on the
On
30th.
New Year's Eve.
That's not what it says, half day before New Year's Eve.
So it should
New
say
Year's
on
Eve.
New Year's Eve
So
day.
just half day New Year's Eve day.
Basically, half day for Christmas Eve, half day for New Year's Eve, that type of thing.
Yep, but this is saying it's actually the day before, because it's a half day before New Year's Eve.
so it's just a half day New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Is that
Or on New Year's Eve day, if you wanna get really.
I guess, yeah,
close.
but-
Half
every
day
week's the-
New Year's Eve, yep.
8 o'clock in the morning, it's New Year's Eve, never made sense to me, but, so I guess written that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if I just took this directly from the other personnel file, from the, maybe it's just always.
And I had one that said about the half day before Memorial or Labor Day, which they basically already had, because they're leaving at 1 o'clock on Fridays anyhow, and those are always Fridays.
Yeah, that's later on,
That's-
under a discretion thing. And I thought, I'm not in favor of that. And once the executive director says yes, it's done. They're gonna expect it all the time. And so the next time you don't do it, they might show up to work unmotivated. So I just, so it says, at the discretion of the executive director, the days before Memorial Day, which would be Friday, the
And
day
Labor
before
Day,
Labor Day,
which is Friday.
Friday, Independence Day and New Year's Eve shall be half days, with the closing of the office at 12:30. I think you should have your list, and if there's any exceptional circumstances, come for a separate thing to the board for, full discretion.
Typically, on those Fridays, they've been, instead of working till 1, they leave at 11. So they come in at 7, they leave at 11 for the long weekend. That's
About
what,
the admin.
so it's saying, well, admin comes 7:30 or 8, depending on who you are. And they leave at 11.
That doesn't sound right, 7:30 or 8, and they leave at 11.
Well, I'm in at 7:30, the rest of the staff comes in at 8. Yeah.
But whatever it is, I don't see, I mean, we're creating more holidays here. And once you say it, so once we say, oh, you're gonna get not only Labor Day off, but you're gonna get the half day before that. Once you say, no, that, I'm not gonna do that, doesn't make sense, it's not, you're taking something away from people. I don't think you should ever
Give them.
Okay, but they've been getting this, leaving at 11 on those days.
But they're working a half day, that's their regular schedule.
They work till 1, and they've been leaving at 11 those days.
Under what authority? Because they
That's
want 'em?
been, no, but it's been the practice here.
That's
I'm
what-
looking to see if it's in,
It was in the past.
Even if it happens, I don't know that it has to be in writing.
yeah, I mean, I think there was a policy, at least this says, there was a policy approved in 17 that a half day before Memorial Day, Labor Day, Independence Day, at the
Yeah.
discretion of the executive director with the chairman's approval.
Yeah.
So that was in there, and that was
That was
sort of-
the old, yeah.
that was in 17. And then it looks like that was, and then Juneteenth was added in 21. So that was your existing policy, what we were working from,
Yeah, okay.
But that was at the discretion, right?
Yes.
at the discretion of the
This is at
executive.
the discretion, so. Just,
I don't like it.
So you're giving them 2 hours, three times a year? 4 times a
I
year?
think whether you do it or not is one thing, but I don't know that it should be policy.
My personal opinion is we get every known holiday off as it is, that we get plenty of time off for holidays.
So I give my guys 5 holidays a year, that's it.
Yeah, we get, if it's a holiday, we're closed.
Yeah.
And in part of that, that's also due to state law, right? Because state law says that public offices are supposed to be closed on state holidays.
Right.
so I do agree, I don't think it's a great looking forward-facing policy to take this very generous, very, very generous. By the way, I have someone who's got out of college who, when I get these holidays off, Martin Luther King days off. What do you mean?
I got 2 kids that tell me the same thing. Say, oh, you're working today?
But there,
It's a holiday.
and Arthur, you're in the private sector, so I just don't think it's very, good forward-looking, you know.
And at the end of the day, they have to work till 1 instead of 11, so it's like, I would just remove the half days.
And that's what I mean, I'm not telling you to let them leave early, but that's kind of, when it's in writing, it's one thing. But if, it's a slow day and there's nothing crazy going on, have a nice weekend. I mean, I don't know how legal that is, but that's kind of my take on it.
That's a tough one with these positions, actually.
Yeah, I could say I just don't like it, I don't.
I agree, I don't like it either.
So may I make a suggestion? Just where this is something that has been going on, instead of the one personal day for the Good Friday, why don't we do 2 personal days and take away the early out on those holidays?
I will say that personal days are pretty common.
There's only one. There's none currently.
There's no,
So-
but we put one in
We put
here
one in that
as
says
a
Good Friday.
suggestion, so I mean,
Remove that
you could
language.
do that.
What if we did, I just think it would be,
And the other end of it is, if I tell the guys, hey, we're only working for 3 hours this morning, I mean, how much work is really getting done when they come in? Whereas opposed to a half a day is, you might actually come in and get something done.
I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Adding an extra personal day.
Yeah. And that's, again, Arthur, you come from a different world, so please share your perspective.
Yeah.
Private sector is always interesting.
No, it's very, and it's very important, but I see most places have 3 days, and Brockton is 2.
Yeah, and I think they'd probably appreciate having a separate day that they can take to themselves. I mean, they're already here. What's an extra hour's worth of work?
6:12 p.m.
6:12 p.m.
Thanks, Kathy. I mean, thanks, Chris.
Don't remember asking what time it was, but.
I owe you all.
We got through all the other business beforehand, so it all worked out.
So that's all done?
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, I think that from an administrative perspective, I think that makes sense. I mean, it's probably gonna be fairly easy to administer.
That's actually easier.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's easier to administer.
So we'll get rid of the half days and add a personal day.
And then we make it clear that there's no, like, you don't carry over personal.
Now, can they divvy up
Right,
personal?
but it's
Can they divvy up personal days by hour, or is it like you're taking the day?
Half days.
I think we did have-
do it as half days,
half
so you have to do it as half.
Okay.
So you can have full house, you can have full.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, you're not doing that hour here. That just
Yeah.
makes them harder to
Correct.
keep track of.
and personal
Yeah.
days are use them or lose them. If you don't use them by the end of the calendar year, you lose it, you know?
Employees got it all figured out.
And they're not supposed to group it into any vacation, right?
I don't think we
Or
didn't
all-
write it that way.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't see
Yeah,
the value of that.
yeah.
I haven't seen a lot of,
It's only a
I
day.
haven't had a lot of employers call me and say that that's been an issue. Right? I mean, I get it. It's sort of extending, but if they wanna burn it up all at once.
But you can deny it.
Mhm.
So it's a,
Our employees always they have to put in their time off
Yeah.
request in advance, and I have to approve it.
I've had an employee work one day in the fiscal year and then ask me for his 2 weeks vacation and then never come back.
yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
well, I
So,
mean, and that's why when we get to vacation, it's really.
so I've seen it all.
How we word the vacation, because vacation is wages in Massachusetts. The other paid leave is not, so that's why it ends up being.
And we accrue, right? We accrue by time,
Yes.
it just doesn't land
Per month.
lump sum there.
Yeah, and that's the big difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we on sick leave yet?
No, still on vacation. Okay. And then on the carryover of the days, I do think that it should be, Dennis, if you remember when we started here, there was a person who had like 6 months of vacation.
Yep, and it was a problem.
That was a huge problem. And it was, by the way, because everybody else was taking time off. It was out of control, and he kept showing up to work. He was the best employee here, so he had all this time, and nobody wanted to take away from it. It really ended up being a problem. So
Costly.
at the end of the year, if someone needs to carry over the time, we have a problem. That's what you have to immediately recognize. I think it should come to the board, and there should be a plan on how we're gonna address the problem. Do you have people who can't use their time now?
Yeah, we'll bug that sometime.
Yeah, we do, we usually do allow the 2 weeks of carry the 10.
Oh, yeah, no, that's in
Yeah.
there. This is
Oh.
above, beyond that.
No, we only had it that one time. There wasn't, we were short-staffed, and there was an issue. There were only 2 employees that really, they couldn't use it, and that's when we were going through all those staffing shortages in the office.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it. In Brockton, we do the same thing. I just, a couple of years ago, brought it, but I had to bring it to the board.
Yeah.
And I sat down with the employee and said, you just got yourself in more trouble. You couldn't use last year's vacation time. This won't happen again. Start taking it. And guess what? He lost time the next year, and he said, it doesn't matter. It's just me. I'm coming to work.
Yep.
He was an administrator. He wasn't a maintenance person. But I do think it's a problem because it builds up. It goes against your comp absences.
So the way it's structured, right, is that you can carry no more than 10 days into the next, I call it a benefit year, but I think you run the benefits on a calendar year, so it would be into the next calendar year, but they have to be used in the next calendar year, or you use those additional days. So it won't,
Those carry days.
the carried over
Yeah.
days, so you don't, I mean, the most you can ever really carry over at any given time is 10 days.
Yeah.
right?
So you're not getting ready to retire and you got it, years worth of comp time.
Unless, and I don't know if this was in there because it was in the vacation policy beforehand, but, as an alternative to carryover, they can come to you and ask to be paid out for 5 days. So basically, instead of taking 10 additional days in the next year, they could come to you and ask you to buy out the 5 days and be done with it.
I think if we're mute on this situation, just that if it is, they need to carry over more time, that the executive director can bring it to the board and make a recommendation that we pay it out, or, at that time, I can tell you as a board member, I'd say, why are we in this situation? If it's just because, Joe employee named Tom Tebow has no life and goes to work every day no matter what, well, that's his decision, okay? So that, I'm just looking at the financial ramifications of it. And they eventually have to take it. And as Arthur said, if at one time they just turn in there, I'm leaving, it just built up a nice little.
Well, so as I look at it, I think that alternative about being paid out for 5 days was something that we added in as a
Yeah,
suggestion. So you don't have to keep that in there. We're not,
We've tossed that around like 6 different times, I think, because we looked to try and get some time being able to be paid out.
Yeah.
And it just never quite flies.
It's essentially a raise for a lot of people, right?
A bonus or whatever you wanna call it.
Yeah. I won't work that time on, that's what I do. I brought it to administration year after year after year to sell it back. Then I was on administrative fine and I couldn't find the money to pay it. So,
Well, it's with the board's approval, so you don't have to approve it. Just the question of whether you want to put that alternative in there or not.
My thought would have just to leave it out. Otherwise, they're gonna come maybe with the expectation that we're gonna approve it, and that if we don't, it's probably late in the year. Now what? You got a disgruntled employee that I have time that I can't take now that,
Yeah, these decisions aren't being made for current employees, it's just being made as a thought process for, what if we have, next year you have all new employees, right?
Well, I think also
It's not taken away from the employees that are here, and
there's nothing to say that in, COVID-like, situation, hopefully we'll never have that again, but like, in some extraordinary situation, there's nothing to say that Kathy can't come to the board or the executive say, look, we had this major disaster, or we had this, huge project and nobody could take vacation for 6 months, and I'd like to ask that either additional carryover be allowed, or that, we
Absolutely.
cash out some of it. There's nothing to prohibit that.
We
absolutely.
did that before without that line in there.
Yeah.
no, I have no problem with that whatsoever. I remember 2015, I had meetings, guys who canceled their spring vacations because it just kept snowing and snowing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll take that last sentence out, but you folks all, are on the same page that there's nothing that would preclude, in an extraordinary circumstance from Kathy making recommendations to the board and sort of as an overall. I could see a situation where an individual, I don't know, may have personal situation, I don't know,
Mhm.
maybe some extraordinary circumstances where it may be appropriate to bring the question to the board, or to ask the board for a special exception.
Sure. Sick leave.
So, on the sick leave, this is, the issue with this is when the state adopted earned sick leave, the way it was written, it applies to housing authorities, right? And so we have to follow what they require. I tried at the time to make an argument to the AG's office that it ought not to apply to housing authorities, and they really just, it didn't fly. So what we try to do with sick leave is put in the language that the statute requires. Generally speaking, in terms of the benefit, public sector typically offers sick leave in excess of what the law would require, right? Usually here, and usually it's 1.25 days per month here. that ends up being more, you know, for full-time employees for sure. It ends up being more than the 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 hours worked. That's the base under the paid sick leave law, or the earned sick leave law. So it's not so much that, I mean, the policy has much more detail, the different types of things that you can use sick leave for. That's expanded pursuant to the law, but, you know, you're not given more sick leave than you already.
No, I she said take some comments on sick leave, that's why I just said we're at that.
Right, so just to give you a sense of why that sick leave policy is so detailed, is we're trying to follow the legal requirements, but at the same time recognizing that, you know, you in most instances, whether you're union or not, you're usually given a 1.25.
Well, I'm just like the bank that's able to be accrued 155 days is just an odd number to me.
So I think we kind of,
But that was the one that was in the policy, I don't know why that was either.
It's usually 100 or.
it's in your old policy, it says 155.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen 180, I've seen 100. I don't know, I just was like.
that was,
Does anybody, I mean, I guess the question is you can change that number, but I'd be curious if anybody's got it
Already
that much
has
in
it.
the
Yes.
bank. So, I mean, if you're gonna decrease it, I would grandfather in the
and that's the
existing.
person.
And how long can that bank roll over for? Is that year to year?
So the maximum you can carry over is 155, that's your cap. But yes, it can,
And you
as
can
written,
pay it out
it can,
20% on retirement.
Correct.
on retirement or death, I think we did.
And so you think you've got a few people over the 155?
No,
Just
one.
one.
That person's been here 30 years now, so
They're at 155,
they're well above it.
but they should,
They
every
max it.
January.
And it's
should
capped
go
at
away.
155.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so it is capped. That was kind of
yeah,
my
it's
question.
capped at
I'm
one-
sorry, I was.
Currently it's
Yes,
capped,
it's capped at 155.
that's what it's been.
I've just seen
I
these
don't
folks
know.
that have been in the job for years and, you know, he's like, I could stay home for the next 2 years and, you know, still get to pay. And then what do you do? Now you got to cover that spot, you know?
Some people do work through their sick time and
Yep.
until they get down to where it's gonna get paid.
I mean, if you folks wanna adjust that, you can, I would just grandfather the person that's reached it.
Well, you'd have to grandfather all the current employees into that, wouldn't you? You couldn't just grandfather that
if-
one.
Well, but I mean, I think if they haven't reached it, then it's not like you're taking away something that they've already.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, you could choose to grandfather all existing employees, or you could choose to just grandfather the person who would be affected by the decrease. The one thing I'll tell you, you know, and this is, everyone's got their own experiences, right? But typically, things like sick leave, personal days, sick leave buyback, you know, it's all been historically considered to be an enticement to work in the public sector, right? Now, I haven't done studies, I don't know whether or not the times have changed such that, you know, sense is still prevalent or just a carryover from how, you know, because it was always like, you don't get paid a lot, but you got good benefits, right? You know, that's sort of,
That is usually
that
the
was,
chain of thought.
that was the chain of thought, right? So the 155 is not the highest I've seen. Like you said, I think I've seen 180. But I forget what we even checked with Easton just to see what their number was,
They
right?
just did away with it.
They just did away with
Yeah.
the grandfathered people. So it's
They have no cap?
They don't offer it anymore. There's no buyback on retirement anymore. When I called town.
No, the sick leave cap.
I don't know what the cap, yeah, they didn't.
no, I think they did have a cap. I don't remember what you told me, but you emailed me when they.
What the cap was or what?
Yeah. I thought they had. They still had a cap.
I'm not even sure.
So, you know, it's up to you whether you wanna make that adjustment, or you're saying that was an odd number, it was the number that was in the existing policy,
Okay, that's right.
that's why we used it.
And I don't know where it came from.
I mean, have you been able to manage the sick time stuff without being short-staffed?
Yeah,
When it's been manageable for you?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anything, seeing a problem, I have no problem leaving it at 155 and let us know if it's a problem.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was, you know, if it's manageable, then
On certifications from healthcare providers, I've seen this backfire. So an employee comes in on Monday, they leave Monday night, they're not feeling well, you can see that they're sneezing and they're coughing. You call the next day, I think they're gonna take the day off. Next day, they feel, I might be able to come in, and I've said, no, don't come in. And then the third day, the same thing, I'm like, okay, and they show up on Friday. We had a policy where we were asking for the medical care providers, so guess what they did on Friday?
Went to the doctors.
They took the day off and went into, sat in some doctor's office and said, they require me to get this. I think 3 days is too short.
So you can do 5.
That's my suggestion.
If you miss 5 days, yeah.
Yeah. And then, by the way, later on, if you think it's a problem, you can do it after 1, right? You can see,
Not under the sick leave law. Well, if it's abuse, like if
That's
you
what I'm
suspect
talking
sick
about,
leave
yeah.
abuse.
so I'm sitting there, I've already talked to you a couple times about this. You're not showing up on Mondays and Fridays. You're calling, I'm sick on Monday, and I say, look, we've talked about this. I want a letter from you. We've already put it into your, you can deal with it that way, I think. But you know, a woman who works right outside my office should show up if she was just about dead.
Yeah, here's a
Get
go home.
away from me.
Well, especially these days.
Yeah.
One of my cousins sent me a meme that said, it's that time of year, is it allergies?
Yeah,
I know.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, am I sick or is it allergies, right?
that's a thing for you guys.
So is it the sense that you want to increase that, to 5
I would
days?
suggest 5, yeah.
It's funny, because that's my note that I put.
Yeah.
5 with the question.
I mean, that's what the school system does too. If a kid's out for more than 5 days, that's when they have to get a doctor's note. I mean, I think that's reasonable.
Gotcha.
No, you'd be sending kids, again, you can, they're.
Okay, because I really don't want to have.
Right, you're getting everybody else sick,
Diarrhea,
yeah.
and you're sending them to the
Oh, yeah.
doctor for
Right.
I just looked it out of order, so.
No, that's fine, this one's, I think we're done with that one. 114.
Okay.
Yeah, we already talked about that.
Oh, this is on, actually it was my language, under excessive sick leave or abuse. When appropriate, supervisors may counsel employees regarding excessive use of sick leave. That's on page 15, top of the top paragraph. And I put, can we put language here that states if the authority believes the employee is exhibiting behavior that leads us to believe that the sick leave is being abused, they may be required to receive a note for sick leave. Well, leave taken for less than 5 consecutive days, awkwardly written, but.
Well, so, in the policies, right, where we identify, and, you know, we can, again, have sort of the theoretical discussion about progressive discipline and that sort of thing.
Well, the summer's here and they want to work 4-day weeks, you know.
Yeah.
We do have sick leave abuse
They
is
can't get
listed in
fined
the
on 3.
disciplinary piece. Yeah, under the prohibited conduct and behaviors that may result in disciplinary action, abuse of sick leave. So, if you want, I mean, I think what you said sounded okay. If you want to email it or send it over, we can look at it. I mean, it's
It's just to make it clear that why am I being treated differently? It's because we suspect, I mean, you have to be overt about this, right? I think you're abusing your sick time. You're showing me a pattern of abuse for your sick time. Again, this comes, but you'd have to do the disciplinary part first. And I'm just putting, I'll send this to you.
okay. So you basically, the idea is if you're in what you think is a sick leave abuse situation, you can send them, you can make them have a doctor's note in less than 5 days. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
We in our contracts at the Brockton Housing Authority, we put you on sick leave probation.
Yeah.
Well, I think, look, it is not completely unheard of to have people, you know, we hire private eyes to follow people, you know, and who've been out generally on extended absences and they're, you know, in the jacuzzi in Vegas at the, you know,
Let's say
so.
more what Arthur said though. Why are you calling in sick once a week? Because I can't afford to call in two times a week. If they're working.
Well, then I had a guy's wife ask me to stop paying him on a Monday. I said, then he won't show up all week. I got to pay him on a Friday at least. You know what I mean?
Pay her.
Yeah.
My thing, that's what I was trying to read it again. If you guys leave these out of their own injury, it's not a workers' comp, and they've exhausted all their benefits.
We did, I think we addressed that.
I thought I saw it, and then I went back looking for it.
So in the, page 18,
That's where it was, okay.
so we picked 3 months, right? So generally speaking, if you are, you've accrued your leave, right? If you go out on workers' comp, it's the employer's discretion to say, okay, you get your 60% from comp, you can use your accrued paid leave to supplement that 60 to get your full salary, right? But then the question becomes, well, when you're using that, I 60/40 seems off. I think it's like 66 and
Yeah, it's like 2/3, 1/3. Yeah.
Right? So, but that 1/3 of time that you're using your accrued paid leave, oftentimes people are actually considering that as paid time, and they're accruing leave on that 1/3 a day they're using, and so you will clearly exhaust your paid leave sooner than you will earn it at some point, but it could create this sort of endless cycle where you have sort of more leave that you're earning.
And who accounts for that though? Is that,
Well, so what I generally recommend is, and it's at your discretion, to set a time limit. If you're out, and in this instance we picked 3 months, I have one housing authority that does a year, which I don't like. But if you're out on a leave for whatever reason, for more than 3 months, you under the policy as proposed, you would stop to earn accrued paid leave, right? I think 3 months is reasonable. Like I said, I have one that's one year. I think another one did 6 months because we know that it's not always a workers' comp situation, but we know that you can be out for a long period of time. And if you continue to earn your accrued leave while you're out on leave, especially if you've got a lot of sick time banked, you've got your 155 days and you're using it, and you're continuing to earn additional.
I agree with this 100%.
yeah, because if you're not getting paid, you'll be more apt to come back to work.
So,
That's the case I had, was
Or
somebody
they-
who had no benefits, was not getting paid, but there was no end in sight or word of their return, and it was like totally hamstringing us in terms of being able to fill a position. So it's like,
So the language that I was talking about on page 18 is just a blanket. If you're you're absent from work for any reason for more than 3 months, you just stop earning any paid benefit leave, right? It doesn't necessarily address the situation you're talking about, but it stops sort of that the potential for ongoing accrual of leave.
I think it's absolutely, we don't have anything right now, right?
No.
I think it's 3 months is very reasonable.
But it's important to actually put it in a policy,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
otherwise, if it's
Right,
not.
it's open-ended,
It's just gonna, yeah.
it just comes back to smacking in the face. Anyhow.
And we replicate that in the workers' comp provision.
Right.
We put the same thing in the workers' comp, just to be clear.
Or they come back and I gotta use the vacation I accrued while I was out because I'm gonna lose it.
Yeah,
Well,
they're not
so-
accruing any benefits.
Well, and that's, where your vacation is earned monthly, it is, like, this is an effective way to address that situation. The problem is where you award vacation in a lump sum on a benefit year basis, or a calendar year basis, or a fiscal year basis, and, then it's all there, that whole pot is there. All right, so, we talked about personal leave, right, are we there? Yep, so we're gonna bump that up to 2 days, and again, it says that it can be full day or half day increments, and they're not compensated for unused personal leave time, that's pretty standard.
And we're taking out the half days.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And they can't carry them over.
No,
have
they
to
can't,
use
you can't carry it over, and it's use it or lose it.
Your feeling is they'll be happy with that, with your current employees, with the?
it. Seems like they're making out.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think they are, and I think that way they can dictate their own time.
So the only change we made to the bereavement leave was, I just think The executive director should be the one that's approving it. It's just a personnel decision,
Mhm.
right? I wouldn't necessarily have it go to the.
I mean, how many days though? I mean, I don't know that, you know, somebody passes away, do you need 2 weeks of, I mean, I don't know how,
I think it's 5 days.
5
We
days.
put 5 days, but the old policy said that approval for the use of bereavement leave was either by the executive director or the chairman of the board. And I just,
I gotcha.
having that approval by the chairman is.
I think the executive director make the
It's
call.
just executive,
Yeah,
like that, it was an odd vestige
Yeah.
of the old policies, and I just wanted to flag for you, I didn't put that in, because I just don't think the chair should be able to supersede
Mhm.
the executive director in making that determination.
I thought it was funny though that, you know, it states you get 5 days, and it says, but if your spouse dies, you also get 5 days for that too. It's like, isn't that covered in the first?
No, it's not listed for some reason, it's just on that way. I mean, 5 days is very generous.
Yeah,
especially
no, I
when you
agree.
think-
And then I
Yeah,
was
no,
like,
it should be, I wonder if it just was a matter of how we,
it's a second sentence that should
yeah,
be
I
just like
wonder,
right.
no, it should just be, you're right, it just should say spouse in there.
And then the living in the employee's immediate household seemed very vague to me. And I was like,
I think that was from the existing, that wouldn't have been,
what is
that wouldn't have been something that I,
Let me guess what put that in. Actually, yes.
Significant other is what it,
I don't think that's what that particular was,
I'm
but
like,
yeah,
is it,
you're probably,
should it be spelled out, but like a stepchild or
right, how do you list that?
I don't know, it's just like,
consider that child. If it's your stepchild living in the house.
yeah,
with you,
I'm like, so then do we need that language, living in the employee's immediate house? I mean, that I think that's a weird.
Well, somebody's going through some hard times and they're staying with you or something and, you know,
Here, you're
I mean, where does it end?
now, we wrestled with this, and we came up with something, I forget what it was. And the reason being is we had, a couple of employees who we didn't know were not married. They lived together for 35 years, they had children, they just never.
And I wouldn't have any problem with that, I really wouldn't. If somebody was together for 30 years and somebody passed, I mean, that's a spouse,
And
in my
so-
opinion.
But we didn't have it, so we had to say no. When it
Right.
happened, and we were trying, but I forget how we figured it out, because it can be abused.
Yeah, we did, there was language.
They don't even go to the wake because they could care less, you know,
Yeah.
well, they got 5 days off.
so
Is
do
there
you, do you wanna exclude the language about other individual living in the employee's immediate household, or leave it in?
I would exclude it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of.
Fine with me. Again, it's a,
Does the ED have any discretion on that? You know, like you could say, "I'll take a couple days off." You know, let me know how you feel and blah blah blah. You know, I don't know.
And you would, I mean, the ED would know.
That's what I mean.
Anyway, if there's somebody in the household that is significant, that.
That's what I mean.
Recognized, maybe, that doesn't fall into these specific categories, but other than.
Or in some situations, it might be an out of state thing where somebody has to fly out, and you know that could take a little bit of time.
Well,
I
it
mean,
does include the ability beyond the 5 days that the ED can approve a longer absence using sick leave.
Mhm.
So this is like, this is a paid leave that's an adjunct to other leaves that exist, and, we do have it built in that.
Yeah.
To fly out of state, look, I know, and Kirsten knows, I've spent most of the pandemic down in Connecticut taking care of my dad, right?
now are they paid days or just excused days?
They're paid.
They pay for reason, yeah.
so the only thing, again, I'll go, the issue we had, it was a long-term employee. I thought they were married. Most people did. When we found out they weren't, we had to say no. And just destroyed the morale of that department for a while.
But there's no, as we talked about earlier, there's no reason why the ED in that circumstance couldn't come to you and say, we have these
The
people
circumstance,
who
yeah.
are basically, they're married
Yeah.
in all but, with all but the piece of paper.
Yeah.
And make that request, or just do,
Yeah.
So we're gonna strike that language, though, right?
the other
Yeah.
individual in the household.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have somebody renting one for your house and
Right,
take us
right.
right.
That's what I mean. Have a quick 5-day vacation.
Do it.
Yeah.
That'll get you to amend your policy quickly.
Yeah.
And we'll add the spouse and the
Yeah.
immediate family.
Yeah.
It is a little weird tweak, I don't know why I didn't.
Your immediate family, and oh yeah, that function.
You get 5 days to get that spouse.
I think what might have happened is that I have had different policies where they wanted to sort of give more time if the spouse dies. I mean, they've been working off of that, right, and then plus with the.
It's probably healthier to go back to work.
Everything's up here, you know, so you can get out of yours and partner.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of language, but I think.
Is there a
Can't
time?
you just say something like immediate family or something? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it
Well, we
does
took
spell
how to
that out.
define it, right, cause immediate family could mean so many different things,
Yeah.
right, so that's why,
So it's kind of loose.
Yeah.
without having a definition.
Is there a time frame that we would want it to be used by, that, you know, we're gonna have a celebration of life at a later date, which happens to be
I think someone
the
probably has
Fourth
to
of
use
July
it.
weekend and,
I
you
mean,
know, taking 4 more days.
Yeah, I always think
I would think you'd
bereavement
have to use
of
vacation
right
or
then and there.
sick leave at that point. No, it's unfortunate because
Cold cup of coffee.
I went and I asked for decaf, and as I'm looking at it, I'm like,
Ah.
I don't think they gave me
Oh, no.
decaf, so I'm never sleeping
Uh,
tonight.
Don't call me in the middle of the night.
Just read this policy, you'll be out like a light.
Huh?
Yeah, I'll be right out, right? Well, for those of you that have seen me do trainings, I sometimes call the handouts my insomniac reading, like, you know, what you can do when you can't fall asleep, just take a read through. All right, jury duty, you know, I just wanna flag for you that there've been various changes in the law as it applies to public sector jury duty. Public employees used to have more by statute, we had to actually cover more jury duty, and they ultimately changed it so that everybody gets 3 paid days, right? But you can choose to offer more. When we were looking at what we had with the old policy versus, you know, what the changes in the law did, we ended up for 2 weeks. As, and again, that's a policy decision. I think it was unlimited in your existing policies. If someone gets called for grand jury duty, like they could literally be going to grand jury duty, you know, every month for several. So that was, I mean, but the 2 weeks is, it's up to you. 3 days is what's required. More than that is a policy decision. Your prior policy, I think, was unlimited.
I think it just happens so rarely that people actually get called and they're on a case that extends for an extended period that.
Can it say something like you get the 3 days or something, and then, you know, I don't know.
The way we've worded it is you get the 3 days, and then if it goes up to 2 weeks, you have to remit, you get paid, but you have to remit whatever the state pays you. I'm not sure if the state even, it used to be $50. I'm not even sure that the
Yeah.
state, like, I feel like they're not even paying people now.
I feel like a lot of times when they're doing the questionnaire, you know, like they'll ask me, I'll say I'm self-employed, so I'm first to see you later because they don't want to tie me up. You know what I mean? So I really do. Yeah, you get the guy going to shore, I could, you know, sit here for a month.
That doesn't always happen. I was
No.
self-employed and I served 3 months, so
Did you?
Yeah, my husband did the same
Wow.
thing, he was an iron worker and he served,
they didn't send me on my way.
Wow.
Well, they used to never pick lawyers, and I've been called for jury duty twice, and one time I was very close to getting picked, but it happened to be a case that involved the town.
Oh, you're in
So the
jail.
judge was like, yeah, no. But the way that we've also worded this is to make sure that the employee, like, they get out early, or if juror service is canceled, they gotta come to work.
Fair enough.
You know, maternity leave is now parental leave, that, we
Right.
updated that.
I thought you got 8 weeks. What about Family Medical Leave Act?
So you don't employ, so the Family Medical Leave Act applies to all government employers, but
More than 10 or
employees
something.
are not eligible for it unless you have more than 50 employees within a 75-mile radius, right?
Right.
So we did the 8, the current policy,
We struggled with the.
yeah,
current
because the current policy
because
has
of the
12 weeks,
situation.
1 week paid and 11 weeks unpaid, right? So, we adjusted this to be the 8 weeks, which is consistent with the state law. And we did
First week.
the first week paid and then the remaining.
I don't know why we're paying any. They should, if they're taking the time off, they should be using sick time.
Because of FMLA, I thought we had to pay that first.
Nope, it's a policy decision, right? But your current policy provided for 12 weeks of leave.
Paid?
No,
No.
1 week,
No.
only the first
1
week.
week paid.
So we shortened it from 12 weeks to 8 weeks, but retained the 1 week paid. And again, that's just because that's what you had in your existing policy. You don't need to do it. It can be that it's unpaid and it's subject to, you can use your accrued paid leave concurrently. And that's why I know this policy decision.
Terry Nelsonetti.
I don't know, I just always thought you'd use your accrued time.
I can't talk right now. I'm at a meeting.
All right, I'm sorry, bye.
But that's just my opinion.
Well, so in my mind, for what it's worth, the way I balanced it was, you are reducing the overall amount of time that you would allow someone for maternity leave. And because the FMLA is not triggered, or your employees would not be eligible for the 12 weeks under the FMLA, you are overall shortening the amount of time that someone can be out of work by a month. So that may have a benefit, right, in terms of absences. I mean, you could do 12 weeks and not have the first week paid, like it's.
I mean, I don't think, have we used this much at all?
We've used it once
Once?
on the old policy, and it was very
Oh.
tough to decipher exactly.
Because now it's male and
what was
female,
going
right? I
on.
mean, it's a guy's sticking,
Now it is.
yeah.
Because it wasn't clear before, and with FMLA, I think that's how I found out. We weren't,
Yeah, we didn't call it, but
Right,
I
because
learned
of
that
50.
tonight.
yeah, see,
That's
I
right.
did
Yeah, but
know that.
you're gonna be
Right.
over the 50.
Well, and have we
Okay.
checked to make sure we can afford all these different amenities that we're trying to offer or changing?
Yeah, well,
We didn't, so I don't think we increased too much. We
Yeah.
talked about the 100, going from the 75 to the 100 per week for the on-call, and I know
Yeah,
I
that's,
asked,
yeah, that's.
can you fit that?
Yeah.
And then, the one personal day was an add, but now we're bumping it to 2, but we're taking off the 4 half days. So I think that ends up being a wash from a
That's a wash,
financial
yeah.
perspective. So I don't know, I mean, and the current policy on parental leave, the old maternity leave, was the first week was paid. So that's, we've actually
And I
reduced
don't know
the.
where that came from, it's been,
I don't have an issue. I don't have an issue with it. I don't think anybody's gonna go out and try to have a baby to get a week's vacation.
Just thinking the same thing, congratulations.
Yeah,
It's gonna
That's what I
cost
was
you
kinda
an arm and a leg.
Leave it alone.
yeah,
That'll be the most expensive free week you ever had.
yeah. Got that right.
so we're gonna leave that one alone.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So then the other policy decision is, as you know, if you deal with FMLA, there's this concept of using FMLA leave intermittently. Sort of this unanswered question about whether something like parental leave ought to be allowed to, like whether you have to take it consecutively. Our position is that under the state law, it does seem to require that you take it
Yeah, I would
right
do
after
it.
the kid's born, right?
Yeah,
But the issue that we sometimes deal with, now that it's clear that parental leave applies to both parents,
the mother takes it, then the husband takes it, or the
or
other
we get
partner
problems
takes it,
getting a
or
kid into school, or that sort of thing. So it's a reality, I think, of the current sort of situation we're in. I mean, post-pandemic, daycare, the existence of daycare and the cost of daycare has gotten much worse. And so, we put it in here for your consideration because we're just seeing that happen more, maybe not necessarily here, but in other settings where there's just, there's more people taking leave and they're having.
It actually did happen.
Oh, it did happen here too?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, maybe that's why we talked about putting it
Yes,
in there.
yeah,
Um,
and it was due to the childcare expense and trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, I said, I'm fine with a little flexibility, but you should be aware, so what I'm gonna do is take my parental leave every Monday and Friday, cause my wife works on Monday and Friday, and I'm gonna be home with the child on those days over a period of
right.
forever.
Isn't
So
it a 12-month span though, that they can?
Well, we have to define that, right?
Yeah.
So what we've said here, and maybe this is worth tweaking, it must be taken consecutively, although we may permit it to be used incrementally if it would not adversely impact staffing and the ED's sole discretion. That's a little different than saying, you have to take it immediately after the child's birth. And if, we can clarify what that might look like if we wanted to, i.e. that.
No, I'm fine with the flexibility, some flexibility, but I've seen this. So you're giving me, and I just look at it as a bank, you just gave me what's 8 times 40? I should know that, 320 hours. And I'm gonna divide that up. I'm gonna put, it's a checkable.
Yeah.
Right, my wife got Monday and Tuesday off, and I'll take Thursday, Friday, and we'll find grandmother watch on Wednesday or something.
Yeah.
Yep, well, and this would not, it would be up to Kathy to decide whether that would be feasible.
Right, so my comment was, I don't mind the flexibility, I think that there should be a little bit of flexibility, but you have to be wary.
Yeah.
Because I've seen, I just, wow, how'd you figure that out? You really parlayed this into something that makes my life very difficult.
See, now, to me, that situation with the staff our size, that would be more ideal than the
The
situation
person
we
taking
did
off,
4
yeah.
weeks,
That's why
back
I give
in
the
4,
flexibility.
then another
Yeah.
4. I mean, when you have a small staff, that would be more ideal.
Sure, okay.
And I think we do see it, quite frankly, more men are taking parental.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and so,
They're using any,
I mean, look, I stayed home with my kid, and then my husband took over. He didn't get paid for anything, but I am seeing a lot more folks with taking my wife staying home for the first 3 months, and then she's gonna go back to work, and then I'm gonna take my time, or as you said, it's like a daycare issue, and I got grandparents or whomever for these days, but I need coverage on those days.
I took the first 2 weeks on vacation, stayed with the family, and then ran back to work.
yeah. Couldn't get back fast enough. I asked you if I could come back early.
Walked me at the door with the baby and said, see ya.
Be calling you the day after. Can I come back? I didn't mean
I'll tell
to.
you, my mother, till the day she died, she said, the only reason why your kid is so good is because your husband raised her, so.
Nice.
Yeah, well, I was like, thanks, Mom.
I've seen young men taking this parental leave, and they are,
No,
it's something that should be encouraged. If we lived in Europe, it would be a whole different story. And I know we don't, but we should.
I'm talking about, I'm just saying, it's a hard job.
It is, and that's why mom needs all sorts of support.
We'd rather go to work.
That's what you think. All right, so these are just basics, the health insurance, the retirement, deferred comp, and, now, the code of conduct, again, the structure of it kind of tracks what traditionally appeared in some of these old housing authority policies. I do like to put very explicit attendance language in there, because that's super,
Yeah, we had note on that one.
yeah, okay.
But I also,
Do you want to talk about something? Okay.
health insurance.
Yep.
Do we offer anything other than standard health insurance? Do we do Aflac? Do you have?
We do Aflac, but we don't contribute. The employees take care of that
But
themselves.
it's something
100%.
that they have the ability to avail themselves of. How about like FSA? Do you do FSA?
We don't have anybody that participates.
But it's an option if they
It's an
want.
option,
You will
yeah.
do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think
yes,
that's standard with
GIC, that's,
GIC, you have to.
yeah, but I don't know, some people, I don't even think they know it exists, that it's an option.
Well, but that's why we say the information and all of that stuff is provided to you at the
Yeah,
start.
the GIC website,
yeah.
yeah.
But I also, but information relative to plan offerings and the costs are provided to new employees at the start of employment. These things change, right? The GIC stuff and what they offer change over time, and
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to.
Changes all the time, and then I had somebody who argued vehemently with me that you never told us we could do long-term disability. I'm like, absolutely did. No, I never. So just want to make sure it's.
Well, we do say the long-term disability right in there.
But we don't offer short-term. So save your sick time, people.
Yeah, right. All right, so just moving on to the code of conduct, I have sort of a emphasis on attendance. We did look at sort of current policies and I talked with Kathy about sort of what do you want it to be in terms of the reporting, right? And we did no later than 1 hour prior to their scheduled start time. And then clarify that you can't call up your buddy and say, I'm not coming in today, right? And
then
can
it
you
gets
let
conveyed.
people know, right? So, employees are required to And also that the employee is required to make the notification, not that.
Now, is it notification to the office? Is it calling a certain number? Is it?
To the, so.
Yeah, that's what I was like.
Yeah,
is it-
so
what's
it's,
the
um,
check-in? Is it
It's a
calling?
supervisor, that's what we said. Now, I don't know how you do it in practice. Is?
The maintenance will call the supervisor, and typically they'll text me and the supervisor simultaneously, and admin calls me. And if it's me, my dog calls the admin staff.
We don't do a time clock, we do time sheets.
Timesheets every week,
All right.
and I sign off on them every week, and I review them every week.
They typically always starting here and ending here.
Yeah, oh yeah, always, yes.
All right, so some of the next section, restrictions on employment, that's really just from, the basics from DHCD regulations. The restrictions on activities, again, political activity, conflict of interest, that's both state law, Hatch Act. I do like to remind folks, and I do put it in the conflict of interest, about the requirements that folks have to do their training every 2 weeks, or every 2 years, not 2 weeks.
I'm trying to see if it was.
Yeah, it's on
2 years
page
was there.
21.
Oh,
I just say they're required to comply with the training requirements. I didn't say it was every 2 years.
Good, because they keep changing.
Oh, that's what I'm saying, like, sometimes you just never, I did check all the, no, it is, but they could change it.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, do we pay for those training hours?
No, it's
No.
online, it's
No,
a
it's online,
state
they
ethics.
have-
So, yeah, so where I'm just saying where it's mandatory, right? I mean, I'm just wondering, does that ever come
It's
up?
a state law to do it. I have a feeling that I have had some employers that have allowed them to do it, at the work, at the computer, because I know people say I don't have a computer at home, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Just to get it done.
I just didn't know if it's ever been an issue or somebody said I'm not doing it unless I get paid for it or, that type of
I-
thing.
Do it here, do it while you're.
Yeah, do it.
Right, so there's that's an option.
You have to do it.
Yeah, no, I've done it. I've already done it.
I take it periodically, and I still get surprised. I'm like, damn, I got that one wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that.
Oh, no, it is. Like, I sit there and I go, how did I? Not enough coffee, apparently. Okay, so
We should take it tonight.
Yeah, really. They've changed it, and it is better.
Takes about an
Last time I
hour.
took it, it is
Yeah.
a little more updated.
I took it about a month ago, it's about an hour.
Do they print their certificates and give them to you?
I don't
Do
think
they
you,
know
I
that?
don't think you, so the last time I took it, I could print a certificate.
You can print it, but I think
have
it saves it
been
and it,
told that
emails or-
and I don't know if you just took it a month ago, I thought that they were changing it so that it's like sort of digitally forwarded to.
I think it is, but I also saved it and I sent it to somebody.
I keep files.
Yeah, I
for
see
board
it. I know I
members in the
printed
it.
office to have-
Cause I wasn't sure if it got electronically sent to you guys or not, but
No.
whatever that website, I think they keep track of everything.
Because I thought it was always nice to be able to look at, oh, look, they did do that in.
Well, I
Whatever.
actually like to see it in the personnel
Yeah.
files.
Well, even with, like
It's
the ethics with the
right.
town, like the town, I had to, send it to them and it was, fun stuff.
So I will take a few minutes just to talk about the prohibited conduct and discipline policy. So you don't have any union employees. You are not strictly bound by concepts of just cause, except for people that have been here for 5 more years. We'll talk about it in a minute. Or progressive discipline, right? But I have found in my experience that it is very good to have a laundry list of things that may subject you to discipline so that people can't say, oh, you mean I can't do that?
I didn't know.
I didn't know, right? So over time, and I do sort of continually tweak this list as new issues arise, I found it very helpful to have this laundry list, and it is pretty encompassing. And it's it's a philosophical issue about whether you want to include it in. We say it's non-exclusive. We say that we're not bound by progressive discipline, although we generally try to follow principles of progressive discipline. More serious or egregious situations at the ED's discretion will warrant stronger discipline. So I do like to put this type of provision in particular, because even though housing authority employees are not civil service employees, under the housing authority law, if you have an employee that's served here for 5 or more continuous years, then they can't be fired, they can't be demoted, maybe they can't be suspended, without just cause and with a right of appeal to the Civil Service Commission. And so it does make sense to really have this kind of laid out so that you've got some guidance to follow in terms of how you handle in particular those folks that, have those protections. Because it is a very different process. It's just like trying to, fire a union employee, quite frankly. And so I have grown to become more fond of this type of language. I do not like the charts. Somewhere along the way, DHCD was telling people they had to put charts in that it's like first offense this, second offense this, and this, I don't do that, right? Because we want to try and build in the flexibility to address a specific situation. Because, it may vary, right? So it's something that happens here, may be more egregious. The same conduct that happens on the premises maybe have a different impact than conduct that occurs outside of work hours, but still involves, coworkers and, affects the workplace. So we want to have that flexibility to try to address those as they come. So that's this, and, if there's anything you think ought to have been included and wasn't, if you even read, okay, what do you want, Chris?
Authority resources.
We
So
should
it's-
have it in
You
here,
do,
don't we?
you have something, you have supplies, equipment, materials, property, funds, but
Okay, research, okay, that's a good add, and that's why I keep, as I tell folks, they say, I think you should add that, and I have updated the, no, it says Reese's, appropriating authority, equipment, time, or resources for personal use or gain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up from the bottom.
well, that's for personal use or gain, but I'm saying if you're misusing the resources of the authority. So adding it to unauthorized use. So somebody,
Okay, yeah, okay.
somebody who goes out of an apartment and leaves all the electricity on, all the air conditioning on for the entire weekend, and there's nobody in there, that's just where they will work.
So that'd be kind of like willful neglect, you'd say, of authority resources?
Something to that effect, just add it in there.
I think adding resources is gonna make sense. Yep, that's fine.
Leave the truck running for 3 hours.
It was awful cold that morning.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else has any other sort of things that they think ought to be added, but that's, again, that's something that can be changed as time goes on, and if you have a situation, you say, God, we got every other situation except this one, and you decide you need to add.
Now, if we do an amendment, does all the employees have to, re-sign and you know what I mean?
So
Or you have to-
I do recommend that.
Is that in there somewhere or something? You know what I mean?
So we do
You have a
say,
signature page.
well, there's of course a
There is a
signature page, but there's also something in here that, at any time that the personnel policies are amended or new provisions adopted, the executive director shall provide each employee with a copy of such change.
The amendment.
Required.
Okay, so you're not giving them a whole packet again.
No,
You're just saying,
you
here's
give them
the
the
amendment.
Yes,
Gotcha.
we've done that in the past with a few items in the policy.
Okay, so the changes in employment status, again, to some degree, having a section called changes in employment status is just meant to sort of harken back to what folks are used to seeing in these housing authority personnel policies. The gist is what I said, basically, folks are at will unless they've been here for 5 or more years, and then they basically aren't at will. And then you have to follow the civil service processes for discipline and follow what the
Even if over those 5 years you've accumulated, things in their personnel files and
So you can, but that would be part of our case as to why.
after the 5 years.
Why,
yeah.
right, it's almost like being, the union employees have that same protection under their contracts, generally speaking, so it's almost like becoming a union employee after 5 years. So, it used to always be that for probably a good 15, 20 years, it was always interpreted as only applying to terminations. Excuse me, and in recent years, civil service then said, no, we think it applies to demotions too. And then, without decision, they there was a case where they kind of just assumed that it applied to suspensions. I'm not still convinced that it does. But the statute says involuntary separations. So that could be a suspension, I don't know, but. No, thank you, I'm still having the caffeine. But, so that's why we try to sort of, make sure that when we're dealing with folks who've more than 5 years, that we have followed essentially progressive discipline and have documented.
What's the ratio now? Has everybody been here longer than 5 years? I mean, off the top of your head, I mean, I won't.
Yeah, we only have 2 that are down
Something back in the last one.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, sorry.
Because I was reading the thing about having unauthorized weapons, firearms, or explosives on authority property. Can we ask if people have a license to carry?
Could be a hunter.
I don't know that I would,
So if they are authorized,
but the only people that would be authorized would be cops, right? Or
Not necessarily.
No.
Well, no, I mean, we can say you can't bring a gun to work,
Yes.
right? But cops.
Right, but what about in the safe in your truck or the safe in your car? That's your
So
personal.
I don't think that we, what did we say? How did we say it? Look,
having an unauthorized weapon, firearm, or explosive on authority property.
So I had someone who was licensed to carry, who worked for Council on Aging, who got a very pretty new pink gun. I didn't know that these existed. And she brought it in, she was licensed, and she brought it into the senior center to show it off.
Oh,
Alright, so
That would look
literally,
like a fucking
this
church.
is, and then all of the seniors were,
Out of their minds?
yes.
So,
So, and this was many years ago, and I'm not making any commentary on gun ownership, but it created such a problem, and the employer did not have a policy, and we fired the employee, in particular because,
it was a bad decision.
well, it was not just that, but there was some untruthfulness involved in the whole thing, right? And, then there was an unemployment case, so and then the adjunct is that I have had situations where there's been threats and people are worried because they know that so-and-so has a firearm or that they tell them that they have firearms. I just don't think there's any place for that on the property, but that is your policy decision. I don't, why do you need it in your?
I think I would like to make it really clear that it's not.
See, press the wrong button again.
I thought that was a button.
It's gonna flash the lights next.
Your weapons on the property, in your car, locked or unlocked or whatever. I don't want your stuff here.
So I appreciate the question about unauthorized. I have some authorities, although not as many, but they actually have like an officer, right? Or they have security. So that's where, the unauthorized comes in, but where you don't have that, we can just say having a weapon, firearm, or explosive on authority property. I mean,
I just have a concern about it. I just don't want somebody to think that it's okay for them to bring it in their own car. And then, for whatever reason, just the way the world is right now.
Well, I don't have guns. My understanding is that there are probably laws or regulations about how you store and
Yeah,
transport
there is.
guns. That's a policy decision for you folks. I personally have just had too many situations where having a firearm in the workplace anywhere, that there's this potential for fear with employees, and even if they legitimately have a license to carry, people get, if there's interpersonal conflict between coworkers, whether it's a rational based fear or not, people are like out of their minds worried that the guy's gonna go, or the person's gonna go grab the gun, and so, but that's your decision on how far you wanna make that limitation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the illegal guns that you don't know about too. Never mind the guns that are legal.
Yeah, so just saying having a weapon.
Yeah, I think it needs to be as strong as we can make it. strong. We don't want your property, you're letting them buy property. Now, we can get away with it, but.
No,
I don't know how the legal, if somebody has something in their personal vehicle that they, lock up and they just come to work and, you don't know it's there or not there. I mean, now where does that
Until
end?
somebody brags about it.
That's what I mean. Where does it end? Or how do you police that? That's, I guess, what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Well, but I mean, I think you would, the first, if it's, they're telling people and someone comes to Kathy, she says to the person, look, we don't allow this, on property. And then, hopefully the word to the wise is sufficient. And hopefully it's just a situation where someone's like, oh, I forgot.
That was my question. How do you police it? You know what I mean? Like, how do
I
you?
would expect that if it was as simple as oh man, I went up to Maine this weekend and I went hunting and I forgot I had it in the bag.
But truthfully, nobody should know either way. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
the fact that somebody knows about it is a problem
Probably
already.
a problem already, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
alright, so that's a good point.
Because what's the law with the tenants? I mean, they're allowed to have, right, licensed tenants or?
Cause it's like their house.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they should be able to have what they want to have. I was just
And I
curious.
always had a question about that too. Do you have a weapon policy?
Weapon policy, or a person's license.
In their home, you can say they can't have them in common areas.
Yeah,
Yes.
But is it, if you have them, or if you're aware that somebody's has them, can you advise them that it must be maintained in a certain way, under law?
that's just common law.
Well, it's actually, that's the law, right? So if they're not maintaining it that way, then they're in violation of the legal requirements and that can be reported to the
Right, that's a whole
police.
separate thing, yeah.
Yeah, so, just if you're going in on an inspection and somebody's got their, whatever, sitting on the
And,
counter.
it's funny, I've never had anyone say that to me as an issue that they've had in an inspection, but I would assume that
Oh, that could
be
easily
something that
happen.
they could be cited for. I mean, I don't know that it's on the checklist, right? When people do inspections, but, okay. We are coming to the end, right? So,
One more.
oh, no,
She shows up late. You notice she
Yes,
kept the chair
Alright,
between us.
later, you didn't get that far.
Okay.
Alright, so, on page 26, I do want you folks to consider this, so, there's a grievance section, okay? Your current policies do provide a grievance mechanism, so I've replicated one here. I don't love the concept of folks being able to appeal executive director personnel decisions to the board of commissioners, but that is a policy decision. So you had one in the existing personnel policies. I modified it to put a time frame at a minimum that someone has to bring, that an employee would have to bring forward a grievance, right? You don't want open-ended, right? Someone comes to you 2 years from now saying, oh, Kathy looked at me funny.
Yeah, like 30 days or something.
I put it in 10 business days. I don't like these. I have one union where it's 365 days in their union contract. I am like, whoever agreed to that, right? And so I modified the existing language to retain a grievance procedure, but that is a policy decision for you folks, whether to keep it, whether to keep it as is, whether not to have one at all. I don't know that it's been an issue in the past, but you don't know what's gonna happen in the future.
Yeah, it might be nice to keep it in there for checks and balances would be my thing.
That's what I have it as a safety valve.
Yeah,
So when I first began here, there was all sorts of problems. And the grievances were coming to, we were talking individually to the employees. The problem was with the executive director. So it's a safety valve. That's all I see it as, a safety valve, just to use on. But I don't, and then I put, but I don't wanna be involved, so don't get me involved.
Yeah.
Well, so I wanna be clear that I've written this pretty narrowly, you may not want this, but I've written it to say that they can appeal everything except basically personnel decisions. So,
That's what I was like, what do you mean by personal?
like discipline, hiring, firing, so, because if you think about let's think about the firing situation, okay? We've already said, that's gonna rest with her. But if you don't carve out personnel decisions in this piece, then you're effectively creating an appeal right to the board of directors for those decisions. So this would be, for example, everything else under the personnel policies, right? Oh, I'm supposed to get this much vacation and they didn't, she's told me no because it's not, I'm not entitled to this or whatnot. I mean, that's sort of where you have the rub about how you define grievances is what is it exactly that you're going to say the employees have the right to come and grieve?
Right.
So I tried to keep, I mean, look, it's not an exact science,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes people wanna complain about working conditions. That seems to me to be something that may be fair.
Well,
But
I say I think she has a good handle on it, but what if somebody else comes along and they do a terrible job? I mean, I think we kind of want to be able to.
I mean, that's what the point of it is, but I don't want to create a vehicle where there can be an appeal of disciplinary decisions. So we could change that to disciplinary decisions if that makes it clearer for folks. But that wouldn't include like hiring or a non-promotion.
No, so I don't mind personnel things, as long as there's some, and again, I don't wanna say it with you, Kathy, but if your problem is the executive director, and the executive director is pretty good at keeping a cap on it, and everything's bubbling around here about to explode, there should be some avenue for the board to hear something.
Yeah, so let's just, but I think that this is such a significant issue that I really do wanna just go back to what exists, so we know. So what exists right now, any employee who is grieved by any action taken by a tenant, fellow employee, supervisor, executive director, or board members must submit the grievance writing to the due date. Director shall act on it promptly. If the employee is not satisfied, he or she may appeal it to the board of commissioners, who shall act on it at the next scheduled meeting or within a reasonable amount of time. So that is really broad, right? Really broad. I was trying to put some parameters around the grievance provision that was not quite as open-ended. And so this would allow, if someone had an issue with a tenant, that they could, and they went to Kathy and they weren't happy with how Kathy resolved it, they could come to you folks. I know you don't wanna be in that position, but it's sort of, how do you balance having that additional layer of review and oversight and providing employees a mechanism, particularly in situations where they're not comfortable with something, with what's going on with the executive director, or not having a child. It's a tough balance. So I didn't think it was appropriate to retain a grievance process that could effectively supersede the appointing authority and the hiring and the firing. And that's why this is worded the way it is. Ready to, can we go on now? I wanna make sure we went everywhere, okay. So the EEO policy is sort of the standard, you're required by law to have a sexual harassment policy. But all the rules with respect to other forms of harassment and discrimination are the same. So the trend and the recommendation is to do this sort of broader EEO, anti-discrimination and harassment policy that includes your obligations to provide reasonable accommodations and all that sort of stuff. So it does have specific language with regards to sexual harassment because we're required to have a sexual harassment policy, but it just goes beyond, would cover racial harassment, religious harassment, all of those, right? So that's, pretty standard, albeit lengthy policy. One of the things that we do work into these policies, and we work it into, I think, the computer use policy as well, is to recognize that your off-duty conduct, including your social media activity, may come into play here, right? And people think that what I do on my own time or what I put on my Facebook page, on my own computer at home, is none of your business. Well, it becomes my business when Joe Schmo employee comes walking in and says, look what this guy said about me on Facebook. And if it's got, racial overtones or something like that, I may have to deal with that, right? So we have over the years really tried to, call that out for folks, that they have to understand that these policies, while they generally were talking about what you do when you're at work, there may be circumstances where we have to deal with your activity outside of work. And then we've got we should have we put in a domestic violence leave policy. We've got,
I did have a question on the domestic violence leave policy.
Yep.
So if someone is experiencing domestic violence, we would give them up to 3 weeks additional time off paid?
it's not,
You'd almost want to come to work.
it's paid or unpaid. It's your policy decision as to whether it's paid. But I'm gonna grab the statute real quick, because I had another question as we were going through it. I think that where we came down and talking with Kathy about putting it down as paid leave is that this is, I mean, I have not very frequently seen this leave be used.
I think it's also just another mechanism to have something be abused.
I think less so because there are pretty specific documentation.
Oh, is there? Okay.
requirements.
Okay.
You
I got in a fight with my girlfriend. I'm leaving for Florida for 3 weeks. That type of thing.
You have
I
to,
mean,
you have to,
You have to have a police report.
yeah. So okay. So it's yes.
you know,
Okay.
documents
So there's some more.
report,
There's additional
police
language in there for that.
report, I mean, look, a sworn statement provided by counsel, social worker, or healthcare worker. I mean, look, everybody knows that you can get a doctor's note. No offense to the doctors that are watching, but it's not difficult to get a doctor's note. But this says a sworn statement, so it actually, maybe is a little more, but, or a sworn statement from the employee attesting that they've been the victim of abusive behavior, but it's sworn, so if
It can
it's
be
not
used,
truthful,
yeah.
it's, can provide a basis to, for discipline for untruthfulness. But I do want to check one more thing, because I had this come up recently with someone else, and I want to make sure the size issue is not, your population is, the size of your organization triggers this. Yeah, the policy's long because the statute's long. All right, I'm not gonna okay. Yeah, I think you have to have 50 more employees to notify each employee of their rights. I think it's a pretty large population. I can double check that because I just had this come up with someone else. If it does only apply to employers with 50 or more, would you want to take it out?
Take out the entire policy?
Yeah.
Why do we have to have a policy on domestic violence?
Well, because if you're a covered employer, the statute says you do.
Okay,
Right? There's a statute that says you're entitled to these leaves and you have to have a policy.
I gotcha.
A lot of these policies are apply to much smaller workforces, right? Like the statutes that require policies might be 5 or more employees, or in the paid sick leave. If you have 11 or more, then it has to be paid. And I was recently asked about this policy, and I did look, and I thought, wow, that's a pretty large size employer. So it may be that you're not legally required to provide this leave, and so the question is, if you are not, would you want to still put it in? And like I said, I have rarely seen people use it. And I've only had one instance in my career where I've had someone who was missing work because they had to attend court hearings for domestic violence. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, it's just I haven't had employers flag it for me as being such a big issue that they felt that it was, that it was problematic to manage. And so
So
you-
the question
you-
is,
you have
leave it
two
in or
questions.
take it out?
You have two questions. One is, if you're not legally required to do it, do you leave it in? And if you do, like if you decide, if you're either legally required to leave it in or you're not and you decide to leave it in, are those 15 days gonna be paid or unpaid?
I would just take it out and cross that bridge when it comes. ZED.
If I was to leave it in, I would take the 3 weeks paid out.
That's what I'm worried about. Just
It has to
open
be
up.
15 days.
Oh, it has to be.
Right. The question is whether or not it's
Well,
paid
we're
or
not-
unpaid.
but we're not obligated to.
So why wasn't it used as unpaid? Because if somebody wanted to use it as paid, couldn't they use time that they?
Yeah, no,
They could
That's
use
have
sick
to be
leave,
different,
they
right.
could use.
Vacation,
days.
personal
yeah, the
days.
employer, so the employer shall permit an employee to take up to 15 days in any 12-month period if, okay? So it's 15 days. The employer shall have the sole discretion to determine whether any leave taken under this section is paid or unpaid. And this section shall apply to, this is right, to employers who employ 50 or more employees. So you're not required to have it.
I'll just scrap it. It's just more reading for somebody to, flip through. That's my reaction.
Anybody else?
If somebody was to come to me in a domestic
That's-
violence situation,
That's kind of my
I
point.
would say, you need time, use some of your sick time to do what you have to do.
But once again, that's you. And we know you're gonna stay here for the next 20 years.
Well, and I had that, so to use an analog, right? I've had authorities that have decided that even though their employees are not gonna be eligible for FMLA, they're gonna adopt an FMLA-like policy because they think it's a good thing to do, right? So this is a determination, sort of discretionary determination. And, then becomes sort of like